End of the road, friend.
A Eternal Test Tournament. I'm Luis Scott Vargas here with Patrick Chapin. We're going to be doing coverage of the top 32 today. So before we get into the matches, the players are ready, but we're going to start by kind of going over some of the rules of Eternal for those who haven't played the game a ton. So Patrick, why don't you kick us off with one of the kind of main features of Eternal, the combat system?
Yeah, so Eternal is definitely high strategy. There's combat that involves decisions on both players' turns. It's not a direct attack game. Here, each player decides what they do with their own units. Like when it's my turn and I'm attacking, I decide what I do with my units, but all the blockers get to decide what they do. The opponent chooses what they do on their turn.
Yeah, so you're going to declare all your attackers at the same time, and they're all attacking the enemy player. At that point, the player decides really want to block. They can double block, they can triple block, they can single block, they can choose not to block at all. And so that's kind of how the combat system works. In terms of playing cards, well, you have a resource, you have power, and every time you play a power card, your total power goes up. And once you have enough power to play your cards, then, well, you get to play them. And different kinds of influence, these are different factions, power out the different kinds of cards. So fire, for example. If you played a fire power, you would have one fire influence, one power. You can play a card that costs one and requires fire.
Right. It's some cards require you be more influential in the particular faction in order to have access to. They still just cost however much they cost though, and your power replenishes every turn.
Yep. You start with a hand of 7 cards. Your opponent starts with 25 health, as do you, and your goal is to reduce them to 0. So
classic.
That's our 30-second kind of rundown of Eternal rules. But it looks like the players are just about ready here. So we're going to be heading down to the match shortly. And again, this is a top 32. So there's going to be 5 rounds that we're going to be watching today. Single elimination. Each round is best 2 out of 3 games. So the players are going to play, and every time a player loses a match, the best 2 out of 3, they are eliminated. So we're going to whittle down from 32 down to our champion fairly efficiently here.
Absolutely. And it's obviously very fast-paced, with I guess we'll be diving right into the action relatively quickly, but with combat taking place on both players' turns, both players being able to play spells on either turn, and just getting right into the heart of it.
Yeah. In addition, we have the ability to kind of jump into matches as we please. So we're going to start every round by watching a match. We're going to watch that match to its conclusion, and then if there's still matches going on, our intrepid producer, Matt Nass, who is here with a second chair of Scott McNabb, this is our production team, we'll be jumping into the matches remaining, and then after each round is done, well, we're going to move on to the next round. So we're going to have a lot of action here. The goal is to kind of show you as much Eternal as possible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Lots of exciting games, too, as we try to advance to our winner in as dramatic a fashion as possible. So many games unfolding in front of us. And
I do want to clarify, when we say test tournament, what we're doing is testing our tournament infrastructure in anticipation of our World qualifiers, because Eternal Worlds will be held next year with a $100,000 prize, and as we ramp up towards that, players are going to be able to qualify in tournaments much like this one.
Yeah, Mom, if you're watching, definitely note the strategy.
Employees and of course their relatives are not quite eligible. So, unfortunately, for the Eternal World Championship dreams of your mom, that's not going to work out. It sounds like we've got a bracket as well that we can take a look at. Though, actually, it looks like the games are just about ready to go. So, looks like we're ready to head down to the games, and we will do that shortly.
Yeah, our first match is between
End of the road.
Alrighty, welcome to our first game here. It's between Grimfan and Dunkelwerk. Grimfan is a popular streamer, so we've certainly had a chance to see him on Twitch. His Twitch name is the same, of course, as his in-game name here. And what do we see facing off here? What are the two decks, Patrick?
So Grimfan's packing a Rakano mid-range strategy, goes a little bit bigger, and is one of the principal strategies that was hit by the recent change to Ikaria. However, it doesn't seem to have slowed the strategy down much at all. Here, instead of just coming out with 1 and 2 cost units and buffing them up, it actually goes quite a bit bigger. Just looking to play very, very efficient cards each turn and build a board presence before eventually taking over with any number of giant Rakano units like Rizan or Ikaria. His opponent, Dunkelwerk, is packing a 3-faction, a very menacing Fire, Primal, Shadow, Haunting Scream deck that takes advantage of just a lot of fast aggression, a little bit of token making, and things like Bandit Queen, and a variety of just very, very juicy targets for Haunting Screaming back for setting up very big combo kills, sometimes using Berserk.
Yeah, and look, both players have kind of started jockeying for position here. We see Grimfan going to the market and going to pull out whatever seems to be the most applicable in this situation, whereas Dunkelwerk, now that Champion of Fury is down, doesn't actually have a whole lot of action going on.
Oh yeah, Dunkelwerk's going to have is going to be spending the next couple of turns trying to set back up, and at this point, Grimfan is actually in a really, really strong position. Usually, the early game is where Dunkelwerk gets a lot of his advantage, trying to just do enough damage so that eventually a Haunting Scream attack might be able to hit and kill in one shot. However, here with just a few too many power and Grimfan successfully defending himself, Dunkelwerk's going to have to find another threat or two to start making progress again.
That Vicious Highwayman can make some headway, though. The Cauldron Cookbook is a pretty good way to keep yourself ahead.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and I think this is a really interesting play on Grimfan's part. On the one hand, by playing the Vanquisher's Blade early, he no longer has an answer to that Highwayman. However, if you remember, the Vanquisher's Blade also makes it so that cards can't leave Dunkelwerk's Void, making it so that Haunting Scream is effectively completely shut off until that unit wearing the blade gets dealt with. This is really going to limit Dunkelwerk's options. However, with so much aggression coming from these two highway bandits, I mean, Fred, as he is colloquially referred to, is really starting to put the pressure down. However, this is Grimfan's big turn.
Yeah, Rizan, Greatbow Master, one of the better ways to stabilize, or playing a melee. Either one of these gigantic Valkyries is going to make it pretty difficult for Dunkelwerk to mount an offense here.
Yeah, absolutely. And here we see Rizan just doing the 3 damage as Grimfan has a privilege of rank but doesn't yet have that second spell. That's part of the spot where the firebombs coming from the cookbook actually come into play.
Yeah, you
can actually turn that to an advantage.
So Rizan not having lifesteal is one of the only things keeping Dunkelwerk really ahead in this game. If Grimfan had another 8 health, then this game would be very difficult for Dunkelwerk. But you know, Grimfan is going to be able to get on the board here. Bullet Shaper immediately ditches that privilege of rank, getting 2 power and letting Grimfan drop a melee Cloud Marshal.
Yeah, is -2 power a good amount to spend instead of 3?
Oh yeah, that seems like a pretty good deal. So even though Dunkelwerk does have a Permafrost coming up here, it's going to be really difficult for Dunkelwerk to attack past those Bullet Shapers. Those 3 Grenadins are not going to do the trick.
Yeah, although now we're going to get into an interesting spot and see just how much Grimfan's willing to press his luck. With just 5 health, every activation of the cookbook requires a certain amount of, how much are you willing to press your luck?
Yeah, press your luck is, of course, one of the more fun mechanics in games in general, and the cookbook does exactly that.
So with a torch, it is implied that he's got 1 more line of defense. Oh, Ixtun Merchant, this has got to be one of the best possible draws for him.
Oh yeah, that lets Grimfan exchange that Justice Sigil for an Ikaria. Even at 8 cost, Ikaria still does a good amount of liberating.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if Grimfan can just get through the next turn or two, Ikaria is going to do some serious work in a hurry.
So notice that Grimfan chose to exchange the Sigil for Ikaria, but that leaves Grimfan without enough power to cast Ikaria. Would you have been tempted to exchange the Torch instead to make sure you could cast Ikaria?
Yeah, I mean, with the Vanquisher's Blade still, exerting an influence, there's a lot less risk. However, with that Bandit Queen coming down, maybe we're going to end up seeing the Torch save the day after all.
Yeah, Torch is certainly the, I think, more conservative play. It does hedge against something like Bandit Queen. And if you end up drawing a power, of course, you're much happier having exchange of the power, because the 9th power is not going to have a whole lot of utility.
Yep, absolutely. So now on Dunkelwerk's side, you've got that Combust, gives you some options, but it doesn't really get you ahead because any one of the tokens that you get rid of to take down the Ixtim Merchant, it doesn't actually punch through any extra damage.
Yeah, so the Bandit Queen can attack by herself, but the rest of the squad stays back.
Wow. And with that Torch, Grimfan has successfully staved off death. Now, once the Ikaria comes down, oh my gosh, that Torch is looking so brilliant right now. By putting the second spell in the Void, Rizan has the lifesteal, and very quickly Dunkelwerk is going to have to put something together because with Rizan gaining so much health, Grimfan's going to pull away. This is quite the turn of events. I mean, obviously Ikaria is a great plan as soon as you get a power, but with Rizan coming down and making it so that now not even a Firebomb is enough to finish Grimfan off, this is a real big swing. Yeah,
Rizan does so much in this deck. Not only does it stabilize you when you're behind, it shuts the door when you're ahead. When Grimfan's ahead on board but vulnerable to getting burned out, Rizan does a really good job stopping that.
Oh wow! With with Combust taking down Rizan, Grimfan's health total is somewhat, it's no longer growing the same way. However, that Haunting Scream off the top can't do anything so long as the Ixtim Merchant has that Vanquisher's Blade.
Oh, there's a Firebomb. All right, the Cauldron Cookbook is coming back to, the cookbook's coming back to pay a cost here, and that Firebomb means that Grimfan's down to just 3 health, and there's a Torch.
Oh, yep. And with one more Firebomb in his deck, oh, wow. Man.
So that was awesome. So Cauldron Cookbook is, a card that's becoming very popular. We're seeing a lot of people cooking the books lately. And, it does come with a cost. We saw that Firebomb into a Torch draw from Dunkelwerk. That steals the game right out of Grimfan's hands. Grimfan had that game really locked up. The Vanquisher's Blade preventing Haunting Scream shenanigans and just a massive board presence. But Firebomb into Torch, I mean, that's a swing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to cook the books, you got to be careful because sometimes you get caught.
Yep.
Oh, very, very, very exciting. So, in general, what's the best angle for this Haunting Scream deck to actually try to capitalize on the speed of the Rakano deck? Like, how do they go over the top?
I think that permafrosting something with Vanquisher's Blade sets you up for a difficult time long term, and we'll see what happens in Game 2 actually, since the next game's ready, and we'll see if the Firebombs come to call.
End of the
Wow, so Grimfan starting off obviously on the play this time and with a pretty solid curve of Bullet Shaper into its choice of Whirling Duo or Valkyrie Enforcer, with a Rizan being threatened for turn 4, in particular if Grimfan can find a spell in the next couple of turns. But Dunkelwerk has a really respectable opening as well, with Berserk to each unit that he draws, a little bit of interaction, and if he can set up a little bit more of a board presence, a Bandit Queen coming down for a big turn 4 or turn 5.
Yeah, this deck that Dunkelwerk is playing is it's kind of an interesting like aggro combo style deck where you have this aggression from Bandit Queen and Grenadins, but you also have the Haunting Scream combo. So it's very interesting to see how opponents tend to play against them. You tend to play conservatively. A lot of the cards that Grimfan wants to protect against are defensive. Like, he wants to be a defensive deck because of that. But, some of the draws line up that Grimfan gets to go on offense, and you see Whirling Duo plus Valkyrie Enforcer really pressuring Dunkelwerk here.
Yeah, and interestingly, Dunkelwerk decides to take the hit, really, really not wanting to lose the Berserk enabling Dusk, the one that's not actually silenced. And here we see a big swing back with 8 from the Champion of Fury, if not for the Bullet Shaper soaking up the hit.
Yeah, and that was a good defensive option by Grimfan, leaving back Bullet Shaper, even while attacking with his other 2 units, and kind of putting the aggression on his side. He still decided that he's playing against a combo deck. He's playing against a deck that has, once you have a Dusk Raider in play, Berserk is really threatening.
And here we see Ixtun Merchant continuing to find new options with Deep Forge Plate coming down,
Ooh,
which is
that's a nice one.
absolutely phenomenal answer to Permafrost.
Yeah, once you Deep Forge Plate a Permafrosted unit, the Endurance knocks off the Permafrost, and all of a sudden, Grimfan's going to have an 8/8 Lifesteal Overwhelm Endurance Whirling Duo here, and that's going to be really tough for Dunkelwerk to beat, despite this big Bandit Queen turn.
And here, Grimfan chooses to go after the Berserk enabling Dusk Raider so as to just try to cap the how bad could a turn get.
Oh yeah, we're about to see that here, and this Deep Forge Plate, again, it represents 8 points of strength with lifesteal or with charge. So this will almost end the game by itself.
Right. I mean, anything short of like a Madnet. Oh, what does Keratin Merchant have options?
Ooh,
to
let's
add?
see. Does Dunkelwerk have something sweet in the market?
Was he prepared for such a thing? Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Combust can deal with the Whirling Duo. The combo of Madness plus Combust is a very potent one, but this isn't a buy one get one free stream. You get one card from the market.
Yeah. And unfortunately, without the ability to do both Madness and Combust, Dunkelwerk's going to have to just claw his way back in, which is going to be real tough against an opponent with Rizon and Whirling Duo in the chamber.
Good attack here from Grimfan. Oh, wow. A very good block from Dunkelwerk, choosing to double block, losing both of his units, but not taking a point of damage and not dying immediately to Rizon.
But unfortunately, with Lifesteal...
Oh, there's Nightfall.
Yeah,
so
the combination of Nightfalls, 1 damage, and Rizons is enough to move us to Game 3.
Yeah, and that game was a little bit less close. Grimfan just started ahead and kept ahead the whole time. Valkyrie Enforcer kind of locked down one of the Dusk Raiders. Whirling Duo got a hit in, then got hit by Permafrost, and then that marketed Deep Forge Plate, that was just a killer.
Yeah, I mean, Permafrost, definitely, it's a double-edged sword sometimes. I mean, it's so efficient. It can solve so many problems, but, Well,
we've seen it be a liability in multiple ways here, right? In Game 1, Permafrost locked down a unit with Vanquisher's Blade, but the blade's static text still caused Dunkelwerk a bunch of problems. And then here in Game 2, it got answered so neatly by Deep Forge Plate in an exchange that was wildly favorable for Grimfan.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's wild with just, how relatively few, how quickly each player is making multiple decisions that take the game in such different directions. Like, but whether it's pointing the Vanquisher's Blade out early, whether it's deciding what kind of a plan you want to market to. But we're jumping back into Game 3 for the exciting conclusion.
End of the road, friend.
Alrighty, welcome to Game 3 here. We've got Dunkelwerk on top here against Grimfan on the bottom. This is our first round of 32, and it's single elimination, best of 3, so the winner of this game will advance. The loser will content themselves with their top 32 prize.
And here we see the best turn 2 from Dunkelwerk's deck. Champion of Fury already getting into the red zone. Like, with Crunch the Hoarder following up, and Crunch in particular is kind of interesting in this deck, both as another way to take advantage of all the different, it has Berserk naturally sometimes, but it also combines well with Berserk. And then it makes a very, very juicy Haunting Scream target.
So you see Dunkelwerk make a play, which I would make very frequently, which is play Crunch then attack because you get auto passed. But that actually gave Grimfan enough info, and Grimfan decided not to torch the Champion of Fury, instead torched Crunch. I have to wonder if Dunkelwerk had attacked first, would Torch have been pointed at the Champion of Fury?
Yeah, and here we see Grimfan starting to fall behind in tempo, though, with the Whirling Duo eating a torch. However, Sheriff Marley is it's kind of a big game if the if Dunkelwerk can't find a second Primal Influence to make each of those bigger.
Wow, even better, Dunkelwerk found Bandit Queen. All 3 of his units can attack past Sheriff Marley, and Dunkelwerk is very cleverly playing around Vanquish by not having enough fire or Primal Influence to make those champions vanquishable. So that combined with Grimfan drawing depleted power means that Dunkelwerk is really far ahead because Grimfan's going to play Whirling Duo, and Dunkelwerk has Madness to steal Whirling Duo and attack past Sheriff Marley for lethal.
Wow, crazy. And with that extra Primal Influence, both of the Champion of Furies are lethal threats as well, so that even if Grimfan had a torch, What a great... Oh, wow, this really came together.
And this is Dunkwork showing the aggressive side of the deck. Didn't even come close to looking like a combo deck. Just went, Champion of Fury into Crunch into Champion of Fury, and bam.
Maybe it was actually just brilliant. Pull out the torch, get the extra damage in.
Yeah, that worked out really nicely.
What a sick play.
Wow, that was the last two games were pretty lopsided, pretty fast. The first game, of course, ending on a firebomb was pretty awesome.
Poetic.
And Dunkwork does advance past Grimfan into the top 16. So, a good showing, and I like Grimfan's deck quite a bit. Big Valkyries, I think, is a good choice in general, but when your opponent opens on double Champion of Fury, Crunch, Torch, Madness, Bandit Queen, just this like slew of aggression across three factions too.
Oh yeah, I mean, the Rakano deck has a lot of play to it, and there's a lot of options, but you can't always have the right answer to everything at all the right spots. And there are plenty, like Bandit Queen and Champion of Fury are two of the most historically dangerous aggressive threats. And when you see them side by side in the same strategy, you got to be defending yourself right from the gate.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too that we saw an Icaria show up. Even now that she costs 8. So because of that last game was so quickly, it looks like we've got another game ready to go. So we'll be heading down to the game.
End of the road, friend.
All right, and we are back, and we are seeing Nephalem packing a real big Argenport deck with sort of the Sky King, but a real low health total. My guess is that pit fighter wasn't naturally in the starting deck,
no.
but the result of an Equivocate.
Yeah.
But here we see a Genev Merchant getting in there and forcing Nephalem to play 2 kill spells, as the Genev Merchant represents lethal. Now we're in kind of an interesting top deck battle, except what is this?
I'm actually level 1 is casting Sharpened Reflexes just to scout, just to look for another threat, because it's got Nephalem on the ropes, but even at 5 health, still not able to quite close it out. And Pit Fighter might not be a card you'd naturally include in your rank deck, but Pit Fighter does have 6 strength. Can actually end games.
Oh yeah, I mean that hits pretty hard in this spot, and Nephalem doesn't really have a lot going on. I mean a pretty sizable power advantage, an end of the story just in case things go south. But here we see I am actually level 1 with options because of this 2/2 here that sadly doesn't make the best mirror image target in the world.
Yeah, I mean I think there's no option but to make a second Awakened Student, but this is not going to end up well, and that Pit Fighter is going to keep crunching here.
Right, and that the second Awakened Student is now a chump blocker, right?
So what's going to happen is Nephalem is going to hit with both and force the chump block, take I'm actually level 1 down to 3, but if I'm actually level 1 can draw a way to deal 2 additional damage, then that will actually end the game. Oh,
no
Merchant
card!
But the store won't sell to you on credit. You have to have something to exchange, so...
But it's not over, because with that Genev Merchant able to actually take down the Pit Fighter, Nephalem could actually attack and be threatening lethal next turn, and even if that 2/1 Keratin Merchant gets through, I'm actually level 1, still has 1 health point to spare. We are down to the wire.
Yeah, so that Genev Merchant's going to come down, going to block the Pit Fighter. End of the story is not actually that useful here, because you don't want to kill all units in this situation.
Wow.
So it looks like Nephalem is going to go for it. Yeah, it's going to have to cast End of the Story. Going to bring both players into top deck mode here.
So basically, first blood wins.
Yeah, though Nephalem has another End of the Story, so they at least have a little bit of backup.
Yeah, I mean, this one, wow, we are quite at the little battle, and this is where stuff like being able to scout can really come in handy. Instead of drawing another power next turn with a free draw, it's almost like you're actually just a full turn ahead.
Nephalem sitting here on 4 removal spells in hand, and oh man, that Keratin Merchant's got to be great here.
Oh yeah, what do we have access to that's
burglarized but can't actually make it night?
Wow, crazy. A Zyndel's Gift, very, very, very devastating. And this is going to make it so that things like that stand together are no longer worries that have to be played around.
All right, well, there's a Genev Merchant. It's the answer you want. It's got Aegis, and
what was
so I'm actually level 1. I think wants to go for mirror image here to make 2 Genev Merchants, And that might prompt Nephilim to attack, force the block, because I'm actually level 1 is at, well, 1. And then that means an end of the story with tribute can cut through the Aegis.
Oh, wow. So crazy. I mean, what's the alternative, right? Like, if... I mean, there's also the prospect of getting like accelerated evolution. That's like a thing, I guess, or is just mirror image just so straight up?
I think mirror image is the best here, though. Permafrost, I could see doing that too, because if you permafrost the Kerendon merchant, then you've got, you know, your Genève merchant out ready to attack for lethal. Wow.
So here we see a you know, the Azindal's Gift knocking the Finest Hour down. And Nephilim's going to have to use up 2 more removal spells, 2 more pieces of interaction.
Yeah, and actually, I'm actually level 1, could have gotten Mirror Image, copied Merchant, and I think gotten a Permafrost as well. Because the second Merchant also gets to get something.
Oh, yeah, and you had the Finest Hour to put back in.
Oh, there it goes. Auric Runehammer. That will deliver the death blow here.
Wow. So sick. Man. So... Man, it just, that's such a great example of just how much, one, it matters what you put in your market. I mean, markets are just such a big influence right now. And 2, how you want to play it. Each turn, each time you use the market, not just what do you already have in there, but what did you put in earlier and what order do you want to pull things out?
Yeah, and the game kind of hinged on maybe getting that second mirror image for Genève Merchant there. Though at that point, Nephilim could have used the end of the story instead. So that was a really close game. It would have been interesting to see kind of what led up to that. But even from that point, that game was, I think, a lot of back and forth, and a really cool game that demonstrates how important the market tends to be. Yeah, and 2 very different strategies than we've been seeing. You know, that sort of Primal Time Justice Alessi deck with lots of different spells to buff their various durable threats, and a surprising amount of burst combined with snowballing advantage. But it looks like we're ready to dive back in.
End of the road, friend.
Alrighty, we're hopping in here. We have Emichaela against Flash. Flash is up a game. And what is going on here? There's an Azindal revealed, Ion the Abductor, a Silenced Dreamstealer facing down against a bunch of Yetis. Oh, I love Emichaela's deck here.
Oh, yeah, and with Wump being one of those Yetis and 2 scouting parties in the ready with just 1 power away from, this is a game that's going to have a lot of swings on the next couple of turns. I mean, Azindal, every turn Azindal's in play is a big game. And we see another Hope Drainer coming down, continuing to just do, you know, put in some work here. If Emichaela can't get something together quickly, I mean, Azindal is just wrecking house.
All right, well, here we're gonna see it. Scouting Party makes 4 1/1 Yeti Spies. Thanks to Wump, they all throw snowballs at Flash 2351, and that makes them all, you know, proc their infiltrate. So Emichaela is going to draw 4 here, and wow, could even
Pock too.
Could even just run out of Pock here thanks to Bond.
Yeah, and you might be wondering, how in the world did Flash arrive at having 15 power when Emichaela just got their 6th? But with, you know, sometimes Mask of Torment has this sort of an effect, and with lifesteal units like Ion and Hope Drainer, Flash has been building a massive power advantage.
Oh yeah, and that's at +7 max power now. It won't be too long, I suspect, until we see the Tormentor come out here.
Yeah, and that's actually going to be a big turning point, because even though Azindal is putting a lot of pressure on Emichaela, with so many Yeti on the table, Flash needs a lot of defense. I mean, what happens if that Hope Drainer, well, that Hope Drainer gains 14 here, though? That actually provides a huge cushion.
So you might be able to tell from looking at Flash's influence that they have, you know, Xenon, so they have Time and Shadow, but they also have Primal and Fire. They're actually just, I believe, a straight-up Xenon deck, but thanks to Azindal, they've drawn a bunch of power off of Emichaela's deck.
Yeah, I mean, Azindal doesn't discriminate. He'll take whatever you have. And the Hope Drainer does trade with a couple of Yeti, and making the decision here, Emichaela choosing to trade off 2 lesser valuable units instead of just one unit like the Genève Merchant, because of that the value of Aegis, and just needing to have spots on the playmat, with Scouting Party coming down, potentially representing a need for 4 more spots.
Yeah, though Flash does use In Cold Blood to snipe Wump, which is certainly the most dangerous unit on Emikila's side. One detail I just noticed, look at Flash's card back. They've got the Wolfsbane card back, which means they did defeat Direwolf in play. I wonder who's responsible for that.
Yeah. I may have had the pleasure of battling Monsieur Flash at one point.
All right. You know, I think the odds-on favorite, of course, is Scarlatch to be giving away card backs, but I guess Patrick will claim credit for this one.
And with Thudrock down, not nearly as devastating because of the Wump having been addressed. But with Flash no longer having any unblockable Helisai, we're actually at a little bit of a standoff, right?
Well, we are, except look at that. Eye on the Abductor trading off, and that's going to put Flash to 19 power. Wow. Now we're at 20, and next turn we're going to see the Tormentor come out of that Mask of Torment, and that usually does a pretty good job of ending the game in just a couple swings here.
Oh, yeah, and with Beckoning Lumen meaning that Flash is back on the draw 2 cards of a turn plan, it's impressive that Emikiela has been able to hold on for this much and make such a game of it. That just shows the power of Wump and Scouting Party. I mean, I don't think anybody's ever said it, but in many ways, Wump is kind of the 3-cost Azendel.
Yeah, I mean, Wump does draw you a bunch of cards, and that is one of the main purposes thanks to the Scouting Party interaction. But yeah, this Xenon deck does a pretty good job of keeping Wump off the board, and Mask of the Tormentor, well, it is a good finisher, and it does both ramp you and then provide you something to do with that ramp.
With this Scouting Party coming down, one of the interesting little battles here we're going to be seeing is the Mask of the Tormentor actually being able to put such a fast clock on Emikiela means that Emikiela is going to have to really figure out what can they do to put themselves in a position to potentially win in 2 turns, right? Like, I mean, the Mask of the Tormentor implies there's just one more turn before this game's over with if something doesn't change.
Yeah, the Tormentor comes out, hits for 8 in the air immediately, and then actually even triggers Azendel to get a Shogunate tactic here. So Flash might be able to send in everything next turn anyway, even if the Tormentor somehow gets dealt with. And that will allow them to deal lethal here. So they're up a game. As much as I love Yetis and I'm generally rooting for Yetis, I don't think they're advancing. They don't have a Snowball's chance in what? And so we see Flash, the Wolf Slayer, advance here to the top 16 as well, defeating the Yeti tribe.
Yeah, I mean, there's just another example of Champion of Fury and Crunch coming down and showing how much the Yetis, whether it's with all Yeti or whether it's with some kind of Haunting Scream, there are just some Yetis that are priced to move right now and are really capitalizing on some of the recent changes that have led to this super diverse metagame we're seeing today. I mean, the sheer quantity of different strategies that we're seeing in this top 32 and that we saw throughout the whole event so far, it's been really impressive. I wonder what direction, like, what do you think it's going to settle down towards, or what are we going to see rise to the top?
Well, the recent balance changes were, I think, the biggest shift because it kind of pushed people away from using Channel the Tempest and Ikaria to close out games. So you'll still see these cards get played, but as those finishers get a little bit worse, as they become more expensive, it does open the door for cards like Azendel, cards like Mask of Torment, completely different strategies, whether it's a Haunting Scream deck or a Yeti deck. I'm sure we're going to see Praxis tokens. That deck survived relatively unscathed. Even the Predatory Connoisseur change impacts them a little bit, but certainly doesn't change the underpinning of the entire deck.
Yep. So it looks like the last match just ended, and so that's the end of our first round. So we'll be moving to the top 16 shortly, but I personally am just thrilled to see Predatory Carnosaur, Ikaria, Channel the Tempest, and Aurelian Merchant all showing up and all still having an important role in the metagame, so that despite the changes, none of them were effectively deleted from the game by any stretch of the imagination. We've just seen there be an opening up of different strategies that are possible. And like Into Shadow has definitely wasted no time having an impact between Vara, Tolude, Last Chance, Shakedown, Azendel, the amount of the cookbook. I mean, the amount of Into Shadow cards that are having an impact already has been very, very impressive. And I wonder if we're going to see any Kaphis today.
Yeah, the most recent promo card. We discussed coming in how many Kaphis would we see in the top 32. You guessed 8. copies of Kfist. We'll find out how many end up there. But even in the 23 card set Into Shadow, we saw Shakedown, we saw the Cookbook, we saw Zindel. So we're seeing a good amount of those cards seeing play, and that's the sort of thing where the metagame continues to evolve, and where people end up, in 2 weeks is going to be very different than where they started.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I don't think we've seen the last of the variety of Into Shadow cards. I think Into Shadow in particular had a lot of cards that snuck up on people in terms of, requiring you to build your deck in a different way, or giving you answers to things that people didn't used to have answers to. How many answers to how many justice answers to curses have there been, and having additional options for, like, maybe torch is great, but what if you want more than 4 torches? So it looks like.
It looks like we've got a bracket ready, so we're going to take a look at our bracket. This will be, it's going to be scrolling because it started with 32 here. We can see the winners of our last couple, or of our first round here. We saw the end of Nephilim's game. Notorious GHB won his first round. He's also a notable Eternal streamer and content producer. We see Feingersh is going to be playing against Dunkelwerk, the winner of the first match we watched. Let's take a look. Let's see. It looks like Bassoon Buffoon did not, unfortunately, win. But Bassoon, all an interesting time, and they lost to Kubi here.
I'm on Team Kubi. Let's go, Kubi!
So that's the bracket. We're going to continue taking a look at that as it narrows. Of course, we won't need to scroll it once we're done with top 32. But
I want to see what Notorious GHP is up to in this event. He's one of my favorite players to watch. I think that already though we're seeing all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, I think we could make a request to feature Notorious GHP. I think our producer might be able to accommodate that. So we'll be starting with Notorious GHB in next round here, which we'll be starting shortly. So before we get to that, I do want to mention Eternal Worlds again, and one of the slots for Eternal Worlds is via RNG Eternal's ETS, Eternal Tournament Series. So if you go to rngeternal.com, you'll be able to find more information about that. They're running cash tournaments, every month on their road to giving away their one slot to Eternal Worlds. And remember, Eternal Worlds is a $100,000 prize pool. It's only 16 players.
Glory.
Yep, tons of glory. You could be the champion of glory, if you've got enough endurance. And it's really important that you kind of explore all the avenues to qualify, since the most slots are being given away through our Eternal qualifiers that we're running. That's going to be 12 of the 16 slots, but the fact that you could qualify through the Eternal Tournament Series is really important to note too, because it just gives you more chances.
Oh yeah, and I think it's just important to note the Eternal Tournament Series has been running long before. I mean, they were in from the beginning and just running absolutely excellent events, helping figure out how to make Eternal tournaments the best they possibly can be. They consistently put on really great events and just provide more ways for people who are looking for competition to get out there and get a chance to actually rank up and try to earn one of the coveted spots. I mean, this is a big game.
Yeah, and we felt, Direwolf felt it was important to recognize the work that RNG Eternal and the Tournament Series have done. So
particularly when it's so good.
Yeah, of course. So we're certainly glad to give them an opportunity to give away a slot. So definitely check that out. And looks like we have a game ready. So we're going to be heading down to the game with our round of 16 here.
End of the road, friend.
Alrighty, here we've got Notorious GHB on top here against Kubi on the bottom, and we've got another kind of Stone Scrag, Haunting Scream, Bandit Queen,
Menace
deck here on top versus Kubi playing what looks like Xenan, maybe touching Justice. Control deck.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm betting this is actually going to be just the full. I mean, so far it sure looks like it's primarily Xenan, but I would not be surprised at all if this deck actually has harsh rules or slays. A lot of people end up adding Justice to some of these Xenan decks to try to give them a little bit different of options. They don't particularly need the spot removal like Slay. It's it's obviously a great card, but having access to harsh rule allows them to play a little bit different of a game. However, here it might also just be the case that it's kind of a semi-bluff. The big thing that we're going to be seeing is if Kubi can actually set up in time to to get a little bit of a mana, get a little bit of a power advantage going, and at the same time not just get overrun by things like Vicious Highwaymen into Bandit Queen. I mean, this is a devastating couple of, the next couple of turns are looking very, very aggressive from Notorious GHP, particularly given every unit that he draws having Berserk.
And it sounds like our producer tells us that Kubi does have harsh rule, so that it is not just a bluff. Even though sometimes you see people who want the 5th crest in their 2-faction deck.
Oh yeah, and spoiler for what it's worth, I've had the privilege of playing against both of these players in the queues not too long ago, and both have been fine-tuning their weapon of choice for this weekend's event.
I assume they're just choosing not to use their Wolfsbane card back after defeating you, but they have the option to do so. So Kubi did make a choice last turn to cast Banish on Crunch, which is the safe choice. I mean, if Crunch hits you, that leads to a severe disadvantage, but as a result, doesn't have an undepleted 4th power to just slam that Vara. So the Kerendon Merchant picking up another Banish is good, but if Kubi's is to lose the game, it's going to be on this sequence of turns where they just don't have very many blockers here, and their hand is clogged with a bunch of cards that cost 3 and 4. They can only play 1 per turn.
Oh wow! And with Berserk, Fred going Berserk right here. I mean, this is 13. That puts Kubi down to a spot where is he going to be actually just super reliant on Vara, or is it going to be like a try to cut your losses and just slay something? Because if Vara comes down and gets hit by that permafrost, that's game right there.
Yeah, the game is just over. But I think Kubi's so far behind that just casting Slay or Banish is just not going to do the trick. You kill the Vicious Highwayman, and you take 4 falling to 4. Even though it's a high-risk play, I think Vara's high enough reward that it is likely worth playing, because at the very least she eats one of the Grenadin and then blocks the Vicious Highwayman. But either way, Kubi's in a lot of trouble, and it's kind of run into the problem that some of these controlling decks have, which sometimes you just end up playing one card per turn, turns 3 through 6, and the aggressive deck is playing 2 to 3 cards per turn.
Yeah, by using cards like Torch and Permafrost, Notorious GHP is able to make two big plays in a turn, fairly often. And unfortunately, Kubi here between a rock and a hard place, because even though here Vara is going to end up losing to Permafrost, even if Kubi had gone the Slay or Banish route, Bandit Queen would have been enough to finish off. This is exactly the type of matchup that Notorious GHP is looking for when entering the event with this kind of a deck.
You just get so much leverage off playing 1 and 2 cost cards when your opponent's playing all 3 and 4 cost cards.
Yep, absolutely. And here we saw, wasting no time whatsoever. In general, the Time Justice Shadow decks really need to, they really rely on having a good turn 2 or turn 3 play, because if they have to actually wait until turn 4 to meaningfully interact, it's gonna be tough. But fortunately, in game 2 for Kubi, they will be actually playing first, turning it around and hopefully mounting a little bit more proactive of a defense.
Yeah, and in order to make these 3-faction decks work, you do play a bunch of crests, you play Seek Power. Those are just definitely powerful options, but you end up in spots where you have a 4-cost card and your turn 4 is a depleted power. So we'll see if Kubi can avoid that, because we've got our next game on deck. Let's head down.
End of the road, friend.
Alrighty, welcome to Game 2 here in the top 16. Notorious GHP up a game here, facing down against Kubi, who's got, again, one of those hands we just talked about. A Slay and a Banish, but no early plays, and we'll see how that lines up against Notorious GHP's hand, who, by the way, has his own set of depleted power here.
And by choosing to keep a Grenadin drone, or actually, rather, putting one down at the bottom, GHP can play the other Grenadin drone that he has and still, get the depleted power out of the way first and just try to get into a spot of being able to play everything on time.
And you see your Temple Scribe from Kubi, which is one of the better answers to Grenadin drone. It's one of the few ways to answer it, while keeping even on card economy. And look, a second Temple Scribe, they're studying up here, but all that means is Notorious GHP is going to be able to have targets for Vicious Highwaymen. So I still think this looks pretty good for Notorious GHP, although not nearly as good as last game.
Oh, and I love this attack. A lot of players would hold off and not attack with the two Grenadin, wanting to use Vicious Highwaymen on the following turn to take down the Temple Scribe. But here we're going to see Notorious GHP get paid off, because of the ability to get extra damage in while they can, and eventually Vicious Highwaymen take down either another Temple Scribe or a even higher value Keratin Merchant or Stone Powder Alchemist, or as we see here, just getting an extra big hit in.
Because Kubi chose to use Slay, on their turn, they end up with the shields down for just a second, but that does mean they avoided getting anything sniped by the Highwaymen, and I have to say, Kubi's spot is not bad here.
No, I mean Stone Powder Alchemist is such a big threat, but Notorious GHP has put together the classic combo of Madness and Devour. I mean, that's particularly good on a card with Revenge, right?
Drawing Devour was so good there, because when you Madness and then Devour the Stone Powder Alchemist, the Revenge procs, but it goes into your deck because you're the person who has that at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the amount of sort of different interactions that you see in a game like Eternal,
Let's see it
really
flip
awesome.
right away. I was just hoping to. I always hope when that happens to see it flip right away. But that still puts Notorious GHB in a pretty good spot. They're getting some good card advantage here. They have a 3/3 Grenadin drone thanks to the 2 War Cries from the Highwaymen. But no clear answer to Vara, and yeah, Vara does her thing here. In fact, she takes down the Vicious Highwayman. Notorious GHB is just not interested in making Vara a 5/6. Though this does open the door to Haunting Scream the Highwayman, deal 1 to Vara, torch Vara, play Champion of Fury, attack for 8, play Grenadin drone. This is actually going to be a pretty good turn.
What a flurry of action! And this has got to be a sequence that he's been preparing for, because this is a very complicated line, and he seems to be just assembling all this stuff so quickly and effortlessly. And here we see the exact play you're describing, and with Champion of Fury, that's going to be, Kubi's now facing lethal next turn, right?
Yeah, the Devour does help, because that puts Kubi up to 16, and then it's going to set up Kubi to have a good turn next turn, but this is still 8 points of damage, hitting Kubi down to 8, and then Grenadin Drone's going to come out alongside that Champion of Fury. Oh, actually, it looks like Notorious GHB is waiting on the Grenadin Drone, going to just play the Grenadin instead. Interesting.
Ah, yes, a potential sacrifice for Avara coming down, But although that's interesting, Grenadin Drone would have brought a body with him. I wonder.
It's, I think, likely playing around Harsh Rule, because GHB
point.
is aware that Kubi's got Harsh Rule in their deck, but this is one of the kind of advantages you get of having a card like Harsh Rule. If Notorious GHP were playing against just a Xenon deck without a sweeper, they would just play out all their cards. But in respecting the Harsh Rule, you're kind of playing into the one by one removal kind of play pattern. So Kubi gets to play like Banish and Keratin Merchant here, and or potentially like Great Parliament and Banish, or some combination. Looks like Banish and Merchant is likely to play given that crest, and that will give them an advantage. Whereas if Notorious GHB had played the 3/3 Grenadin Drone, they'd be in a little bit better shape.
And here we see Kubi merchanting for a Banish, keeping a Banish on top, having a Banish. It just wants as much fast interaction as possible, because at this point, starting to turn a corner, but is getting low enough that the biggest thing that needs to be defended against are charge threats from things like Haunting Scream, Bandit Queen, and Vicious Highwayman, and Champion of Fury.
Yeah, and I think Kubi, whether they block the Grenadin with their Keratin Merchant, really is going to show you how much they value preserving their life total. Because you're trading down significantly there. And yeah, Kubi runs that block. Trading a 2/1 deadly for just a 1/1 indicates that Kubi does not want to risk anything, does not want to fall down to 7. So Notorious GHB reloading here with Grenadin Drone plus Duskgrader, keeping that one Grenadin in hand. Again, a slight concession to Harsh Rule here.
And here we see Vital Arcana, the 2 versus 4 health really coming into play. I mean, Kubi would love to have that extra cushion, but instead now has to make some tough decisions. I mean, the Great Parliament does provide a big board presence, and 1 Banish is a pretty solid form of interaction. But what's the best possible way to try to get out of Haunting Scream, Vicious Highwayman, and Bandit Queen range?
Yeah, I think it does involve playing the Great Parliament and banishing on their turn, even though it's a fast spell, to stop Duskgrader from inspiring any future draws here.
And interestingly, Notorious GHP has enough Nightfall in their deck to be actually, really ticking away, even if their units can't get through. The incidental damage from, a Stray Torch or a Vicious Highwayman shot. There's a variety of ways that Notorious GHP can try to sneak in the last couple points of damage. And that's to say nothing of Madness.
Combust here takes down one of the Owls, but Notorious GHB still has no really good attacks here. Nightfall off of that Shakedown is definitely an advantage for Notorious GHB here, given the relative life totals of both players.
Here we see Vital Arcana still doing some work. You know, a lot of control decks had moved away from Vital Arcana after the relatively recent change, but if you're actually playing with Life Force triggers like Mask of Torment, Vital Arcana still gains that health, and every little bit of health matters.
So Kubi draws another Sigil and a Desert Marshal. Desert Marshal is one of the best answers to Haunting Scream around, because it takes off the flying, it lets you block, and it takes off all the other battle skills that happen to come along with Haunting Scream.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Man, the incidental health gain of this Mask of Torment deck is actually going to really come into question. What do you think about the deciding to hold the Waystone?
Kubi had a bit of a decision point there, and I think that playing the Crest was a good play, because you're setting up your next turn, and you can just play the Waystone next turn. You don't think you're going to die in one turn, though. That apparently that might be premature. Kernan Merchant into Madness after hitting the revenged Stone Powder Alchemist.
Man,
Kubi's not dead here thanks to Desert Marshal, but this is not looking good.
No, this is a tough one. I mean, now the question is, do you Desert Marshal one of the other units with an ability, or do you just knock down the 4/4 and chump it instead of the 3/3? I mean, you got to block something. It seems like how much can you really do, right? Like you're pretty close to Harsh Rule or Bust, but with that Time Waystone in there, it's actually possible that you might be able to survive some other way, particularly when you have a 4/4 to block with.
I like staying at 2, and at this point, Notorious GHB is just deciding, Harsh Rule's not a thing. I'm just going to play out my last Grenadin Drone, and that looks like it. Kubi's going to be able to go up to 4 off of the Amber Waystone, block the 3/3 Grenadin Drone, and take 7 points. It's going to be tough. I mean, you might as well pass and see what happens. The unnecessary Bandit
End of
Queen.
the road, friend.
Oh, yeah. This is Notorious GHB just running up the score here and hitting for massively past lethal. That'll bring Notorious GHB into the top 8 and will be, well, the end of the road for Kubi here. That will be our top 16 round, though. I'm sure we've got other matches. Our producers are going to be looking for other matches to jump in on. And so far, we've seen these aggressive Haunting Scream decks do pretty well for themselves.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when people are relying on interaction with stuff like Slay and Harsh Rule, Haunting Scream is at its best picking apart strategies like that. If you spend all your power in Harsh Rule thinking that's going to save you, in the next turn they have some sort of a charge, berserk, like all sorts of Bandit Queen or Vicious Highwayman shenanigans, it can really turn things around. I mean, that's part of the reason you play these Haunting Scream decks, is even though they can be so fast and bursty, they have legit end games.
Yeah, it's funny that internally, whenever we preview or release a new unit that costs 4 or less, the first thing we hear is, oh yeah, you can Haunting Scream that. Haunting Scream has just made its mark on this game as one of the more popular cards, regardless of the level of effectiveness, which at this point is looking pretty high. I mean, it waxes and wanes. It's one of the cards that draws the most attention. It's just one of the most interesting cards. So it is funny that we always have to do the Haunting Scream check, and sometimes we'll release a unit that costs 5 because it's like, wow, if this got Haunting Screamed, it would be a little bit much. So we've got another game ready, so we're going to be heading down to the game right now.
End of the road, friend.
Alrighty, welcome to the top 16 here. We've got Overmaster facing down against Flash. We saw Flash win last round, and this is actually in game 1 still. So we saw a match draw to its conclusion well. These two players were still in their first game, and it looks like a lot has happened this game. We've got, Flash pulling ahead here. A Zindel revealed at some point hit the board, and it left some Helisei behind, even though at this point they're not drawing extra cards. Whereas the Overmaster is playing what looks like another Tri-Faction Haunting Scream deck, though they ended up with a Banish in their hand thanks to... I'm going to guess... Look, I'm going to put this together. I think they Madnessed a Zindel Revealed, got a hit in with something, and then sacrificed the Zindel Revealed. I bet if we look at Overmaster's Void, we'll see a Zindel Revealed hiding in there somewhere. And bam, there we go.
Yep. The various ways that we could have arrived at this spot, it all begins with some amount of early defense. and both players stealing cards from each other. Man.
So here we see Crunch going Berserk here, along with Dusk Raider going Berserk, and we've got a fairly large attack. The fact that the Aurelian Merchant only has 1 strength now, or has lost 1 strength now, somewhat relevant, or it certainly could be.
Yeah,
at
and
this
in
point,
the spot, none of these units would actually trade with it. But whenever you end up facing some of those Grenadin drone and various Grenadin tokens that the Scream decks are relying on, you really see that difference in the Aurelian Merchant's board presence.
And though I actually like Flash's spot still pretty well here. The Beckoning Lumen is going to provide a lot of extra action here, and Madness is great, but Madness without a sacrifice outlet does end up leaving you down a card. So the Overmaster is not really gaining ground each turn that passes here.
Right, and Flash having another... oh, this is an exciting... I was going to say, yeah, how much is the Reckless that Dusk Raider has had to pick up going to influence any potential bluff attacks?
Well, it has to attack here. Overmaster is choosing not to use Madness on the Beckoning Lumen. And, let's see if Flash can just snap off the block, and they do. They just put the Beckoning Lumen in front of the Dusk Raider, trade their Helixy for a Crunch, and this leaves Flash significantly far ahead. If we had some kind of bar that would represent the advantage, Flash would be nearly pretty close to maxed here.
Wow. Interesting. Choosing to hold the Grenadin as a potential card to put in the market, but this is really going to come back to haunt him because of the Vara not having anything worth sacrificing. However, on balance, Flash did have a Vara's Touch in the chamber, and so here I think the Overmaster is going to get a little bit of validation, knowing that playing the Grenadin drone would not have helped.
No, and here we see Dream Snatcher drawn off Beckoning Lumen here, and Flash has just amassed just too strong of a board for the Overmaster to really come back from. It's going to take some good draws from the Overmaster, and Vara having lifesteal means that Overmaster does not have very much time.
Yeah, I mean, I think really it's got to start with some sort of a sack outlet, because Vara's just going to take over this game in a hurry if you can't put together some kind of an answer.
Yeah, those Lumens are beckoning here. Playing out 3 Beckoning Lumens after gaining 5 off the Vara is really just going to lock it up for Flash here.
Becky knows what she's doing.
Oh, yeah.
She knows exactly what she's doing. And here we see Flash totally reloading. I mean, if the Overmaster doesn't assemble something very, very competitive on this turn, well, that's interesting.
So
what does that mean?
You could Madness 2 of the Beckoning Lumens and hit with everything, or you could Madness just 1 and play a Bandit Queen. I don't think either of those lead to lethal, especially since that Aurelian Merchant is more than ready to hop in front of whatever comes down.
If you want to draw a card, you can Madness Beckoning Lumen and Vara.
Ooh, that is a combo. Yeah, that would let you draw a card, but I don't know if that sets you up to win the long game here.
And so it's going to start. It looks like it's starting with Vara, if only because the Overmaster needs a little bit of health, right? I mean, this is getting down to the nitty-gritty.
Oh, Overmaster likes your play. We see Madness taking Vara, Madness taking Beckoning Lumen. Both will attack. At this point, Flash could either just take 10 or just toss the Aurelian Merchant in the way to take 5 less, because given that they're going to get back those units end of turn, they don't really have incentive to block and trade.
Yep, and here we see exactly that. I mean, Flash just has so much material going. They just really want to trade anything that they don't need right now to buy themselves a little bit of extra time.
Flash leading off with the second Vara, which may prompt the sacrifice of a Grenadin, or may not.
Well, and it's tough because that Grenadin has chump blocking duties to do. I mean, the Overmaster is going to fall, like the Overmaster has very little time left. And here we see the Grenadin drone, in fact, jumping in the way. And notably, that Dusk Raider staying in place so as to give the Overmaster an extra shot at drawing something with Berserk. Remember, both Bandit Queen, so Bandit Queen has Berserk, and whatever else could be on top of the deck has Berserk. What sort of a combination can the Overmaster actually put together that could potentially punch through this? I mean, there's no taking over the game at this point, right?
No, especially given that the Banish and Annihilate draws from Flash means that they could just banish like Bandit Queen if it comes down to it.
Yep, and here Fred comes down, is potentially representing a 9-point health, 9 points of health gain, to say nothing of Bandit Queen powering him up. But I just don't think that this is going to be enough to survive, so much Vara and Becky damage.
Yeah, and then Vara's going to be able to block the Bandit Queen. So Flash is going to end up taking a hit off of Dusk Raider, but not even close to enough. So Flash wins game 1 against the Overmaster. Remember, that was just game 1. They had a long, drawn-out game, a lot of interaction, and they're going to have another game which we will be watching once they restart. So it looks like in most cases Flash is trying to control the game. There's not very many matchups where they're looking to be the aggression.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential tempo swings that the deck is capable of, but in general, particularly against a Haunting Scream deck, they're going to be the more defensive side and just trying to survive, just kind of trying to stretch the game out. With so much fast interaction with things like Banish, they actually have chances of not just eventually falling to a flying charge berserk threat, but it's important to note that one of the key parts of interaction, Annihilate, can't hit Bandit Queen, can't hit Crunch, can't hit Vicious Highwayman, and that's one of the things that this deck is going for. Champion of Fury.
Yeah, it's fairly Annihilate proof, right? Like it hits the Dusk Raider and Grenadins and maybe Carandon Merchant, not a whole lot.
Right, absolutely. So it looks like we have the game ready, and we're going to be jumping back in.
End of the road, friend.
Alrighty, here we've got game 2 of the Overmaster against Flash. Flash is up a game here.
And loving his opening hand. I mean, and why wouldn't you, right? Like with this kind of a curve.
The only real question with this opening hand is, after you play a banner on turn 1, on turn 2, do you play your Amber Waystone so you can cast Vara's Choice, or do you just play another banner so that on turn 3 you're guaranteed to be able to cast Eye in the Abductor? Well,
I would just draw a Shadow Sigil and have everything work out exactly perfect.
Yeah, that works out quite nicely. So now Flash is going to be able to play a Vara's Choice before Overmaster gets anything on the board. And Vara's Choice is especially good because it does silence the unit that it discards. So Overmaster could Haunting Scream whatever gets taken back, but it's just not going to have that big of an effect.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think Vara's Choice is absolutely phenomenal in this matchup. I mean, one of the challenges, as we discussed earlier, with these sort of Zenin or 3-faction Azendel decks is how important it is to have a good turn 2. I mean, they've got lots of great options for turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, but turn 2 is a hard one for them, and Vara's Choice can do such a solid job of picking apart the Haunting Scream strategy.
And Flash looks like they take the Carandon Merchant, leaving the Overmaster with a Dusk Raider, which I'm sure Flash is hoping gets sniped by this Eye in the Abductor here.
Yeah, I mean, the big advantage, I think, of playing just straight Xenon instead of a 3-faction deck is just how much smoother your power comes out early. And it's not like you want Harsh Rule against these Scream decks.
Wow, so this was a really good interaction for Overmaster. Shakedown can take Eye in the Abductor, and because Ambush you can only play either during attacks or at the end of the opponent's turn, Shakedown just takes the Eye and kind of wastes Flash's whole turn.
And in fact, almost 2, because now Flash is going to have to play a depleted power, which is going to mean that the powerful 4-drops of like Beckoning Lumen, Killing Cold Blood, Mask of the Torment, none of them are options this turn. He's going to have to settle for, you know, something like annihilating the Dusk Raider, for instance.
Yeah, but that gives a crunch hit, and Crunch is, well, going to crunch and draw a bunch of extra cards, hit for a bunch of damage. So that whole Shakedown line was critical for Overmaster. I think that puts Overmaster fairly far ahead here.
Yeah, I mean, the Overmaster's got some really good tempo, but it's worth noting that the Flash actually is going to start having great turns every turn starting next turn, and is not exactly at the lowest health total yet.
True. It's really going to hinge on what Crunch draws in this attack here.
Oh, yeah. You know, and Crunch is a little bit of a maniac. It's not just what do you draw from the Crunch, what are you gonna discard, because if you want to recharge that Berserk, but it looks like here we're actually not seeing, you know, with Berserk already there isn't even much incentive to get rid of anything except just an extra power.
Yeah, so Overmaster's going to ditch the Feln banner, play another Crunch, likely play a Crest and set up their next turn. But with a hand of Madness, Haunting Scream, and a Vicious Highwayman on top, the Overmaster's got a lot cooking here. Flash's best chance is probably to start using 1-for-1 removal to take out like the Crunch that hasn't hit yet, but Haunting Scream still makes that not that effective.
Right, I mean, we can see Iron come down and potentially allow the Zenin banner to be undepleted, but Zenin Initiation is only a temporary solution because of it not being fast interaction. it's we're going to see some amount of either Vicious Highwayman's charge, Haunting Scream, giving charge. I mean, the amount of different ways that the Overmaster has to attack out of nowhere means that even though Flash is at 23, he's barely a couple turns away from death if he doesn't just really start to stabilize quickly. I mean, this is the kind of game the Overmaster wants to play with. This Scream deck is a very, this sort of tempo-oriented game where not everything's on the table. You don't know what all threats are coming. You don't know how fast they're coming in what order.
Well, Overmaster's going to go for Haunting Scream to get that crunch back. Just guaranteed get those 2 extra cards while the getting's good. And yeah, the Haunting Scream deck ahead on tempo, as you said, but also doing pretty well on card economy.
Yeah, I mean, all these extra cards, whether it's the units that have summon abilities, the extra card draw directly, the card filtering, this new style of Scream Berserk deck that's a little less reliant on pump spells is just so good for grinding.
Yeah, we're seeing fewer gifted battles, rapid shots, combo kills, and more just consistent playing powerful 3 and 4 cost cards and using Scream to buy them back.
And here we see again madnesses galore, but with no sack outlet. Vara having an absolutely massive board presence.
So at this point, Overmaster can Madness Vara and then play Bandit Queen and hit for a significant amount of damage.
That's lethal, right? Without a fastball?
Yeah, so this is going to end up being 14, and that'll put Flash to -1 and end the game here. So Overmaster is forcing a game 3. The Madness, as the last card cast, does a pretty good job finishing the game. If you cast it earlier than that, you do really want a sack outlet, but sometimes it's just lethal.
Yeah, if my sack outlet is your health totals at 0.
Yes. If the game ends during combat, then I guess I don't
have to give it back.
I think you get to keep it for your collection too.
Yes, maybe.
That would be some interesting incentives there. So we saw Overmaster force a game 3 against the Xenon Life Force deck, against the Tri-Faction Haunting Scream deck. And what are kind of the keys in this matchup? What is Flash looking for example, to try to pull ahead here?
So in this next game, Flash is really going to want to start out again similar to the last game of have some sort of a good way to start interacting on turn 2, and from there power coming out smoothly. It's such a tough call to have to play your Ion on your own turn. You want to get the blowout, but at the same time that ended up being the pivotal sequence of that game.
That shakedown certainly did determine the outcome of that game, and well, looks like we've got a game 3, so we're going to head right down to that.
End of the road, friend.
Alrighty, welcome to round 3 here in our top 16, or rather game 3. Overmaster against Flash. The winner of this will advance, and Flash once again kicking things off with a turn 2 Vara's Choice. Has some options, has a lot of choices. Dusk Raider, Vicious Highwayman, and Crunch the Hoarder, all of which are pretty valid to take here.
And interestingly, Flash doesn't gain information about which power cards the Overmaster has from that discard spell, meaning that Flash doesn't know that there's no primal influence in the Overmaster's near future unless it comes from the top of the deck.
Here we see Overmaster casting Shakedown on Ion, but less devastating this time because Flash this time didn't leave all their power up to play Ion, only to have her shook down.
Shake it down.
And looks like Dream Snatcher is going to be coming down here for Flash. Yeah, this is actually a pretty important card in this matchup because it just gives you a lot of incremental life gain, which means that you end up not being vulnerable to these big Haunting Scream attacks as much.
Absolutely. I mean, if Flash can ever just stay ahead of the board where they're the one with the initiative, that's actually just super huge. And here we're seeing exactly that. A second threat coming down, an extra card, beginning to snowball an advantage. Drawing that second Shadow Influence last turn was just so big for making Flash's game plan come together much more smoothly. Yeah,
and Beckoning Lumen here. A very appealing target for something like Madness plus Devour, but Overmaster missing the Madness. Carrington Merchant can go find it though, so Overmaster is kind of forced into a position they don't want to be in, which is to play defensively. They're being reactive. They're not being the person dictating the pace of the game.
Yeah, they've got a lot of interesting options this time though, because like with that Dusk Raider on the table and a Vicious Highwayman could even potentially shoot Beckoning Lumen so that the Dusk Raider could get in. Carrington Merchant could go try to find something if they're willing to actually try to set up things, or the Overmaster could be champion of Furying with holding Devour open. What they really need to do, though, is break up the Beckoning Loom and Hope Drainer combo one way or the other, because the combination of Flash gaining extra health every turn and drawing an extra card every turn is not something the Overmaster can endure too many turns of before falling hopelessly behind.
If the Overmaster wants to get rid of the Beckoning Lumen this turn, they could have merchanted for Combust, but that's just such a disadvantageous play, like where you end up just down so much. Oh wow, Flash is playing very conservatively here, just trading their Beckoning Lumen for a Champion of Fury. I think if I'm the Overmaster, I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, I mean, well, and the threatening 8 damage is actually a lot. Like, you don't know what all... Like, Flash doesn't know for sure what the Overmaster's up to. If the Overmaster has a couple Haunting Screams, each one of them represents potentially 8 damage. So it's actually going to be... this is definitely one of those spots where it's not just the control deck that benefits from people not knowing which of your cards you have. It's also the aggressive deck. This Haunting Scream deck gets so much respect because of its ability to have charged threats attack out of nowhere. And here we see Flash being conservative as a result.
Yeah, going back to something you mentioned earlier, but I want to touch on again. When Flash casts that Vara's Choice, Flash only gets to see the relevant targets in Overmaster's hand. So only gets to see units, doesn't get to see power, or doesn't get to see spells. And that's important because, we have full information, but just keep in mind Flash does not.
Right, and here we see the benefit of that holding up Devour, just giving the Overmaster a little bit of extra card economy. Dark Return is particularly exciting in spots like this, though, because of just how much Dark Returning all these units that you're grafting skills onto, whether it's Berserk or Charge or in this case Reckless. You get to keep all those skills.
Yeah, Dark Return, one of my favorite cards in the game. It's just a lot of fun to cast, and I suspect at some point here we will see Dark Return pick up that Champion of Fury to just crack in for 10 points of damage out of nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I do love this leading with a Grenadin drone beforehand, though. Why give the information to Flash? And remember, Dark Return is not a target that Vara's Choice could hit, but if he Dark Returned back a unit and just held on to it, now he's more vulnerable to Vara's Choice. Instead, the Grenadin drone comes down, helping play around any potential Varas, which, as we see, is exactly right in this spot.
The combination of Combust and Kerendon Merchant also means Overmaster has access to Madness, which is in the market. So Merchant for Madness plus Combust could set up a nice turn. Can't do it all in one turn next turn, but in 2 turns they'll be able to string all those 3 cards together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Flash, even though Flash is at 27, Flash has so many big options in their hand. It's going to be interesting to see how the next couple of turns go. I think this one's still too close to call.
No, I think that both players are doing their thing, and this is the kind of game where it is the most interesting because we see both decks kind of working as intended. Oh, the beginning of the game wasn't great for Overmaster, but it seems like they've gotten the game to a more manageable point here.
Yep, and here we see Kerendon Merchant coming down a little early, and without Dusk Raider already on the table. So the question is, what is the Overmaster going to get? If they were going to get a unit, obviously Dusk Raider could have already been in play in order to ensure that whatever they got had Berserk. But instead, it looks like a setup for some sort of a... Oh, and in fact, we do see the Madness combo getting set up. With that Combust there, this is potentially a really big turn next turn.
Yeah, and Overmaster, I think, is just going to go for broke here. Sets up the Madness for next turn. Dark returns back Champion of Fury and just gets to attack for a ton here. Because remember that Champion of Fury has Berserk. So that champion's dealing 10. The Aurelian Merchant's going to stand in front of the Grenadin. This is going to be a hit for 14 here. Which, that's going to take Flash from a comfortable life total to, well, an uncomfortable one.
Yeah, I mean, that's more than half the way. And here we see Vara coming down. Vara normally would be such an amazing board presence. But unfortunately, that Madness combo is potentially going to disrupt it. Zen Initiation, however, actually does help a little bit here, right? Like, not only does the Overmaster lose one of their big threats, Flash has an extra 6-point health cushion to try to survive this onslaught.
Still, the Overmaster drew Haunting Scream, so this turn, Overmaster can Madness back that Vara, Haunting Scream back the champion, smash with everything potentially, and then use Combust to take out use Vara to take out the Dream Stealer.
Is there any chance that they just combust the 0-4, steal the Hope Drainer, Scream, and don't even worry about Vara because Vara can't block this turn?
10, 17, 19? That's actually lethal. Nope, that's even better. So Overmaster's going to take a little bit of time to make sure this works out. Wait, no, that's not quite lethal, is that? Because you do have to combust sacrificing the Grenadin. So you'd end up doing 10 off of the champion.
One
and
short.
4 off the Vicious Highwayman, 2 off the Carrington Merchant, and 2 off the Dreamstealer here. So, and our producer lets us know that the Carrington Merchant has Berserk, so that line of play is actually lethal. We see, we see those teeth there representing Berserk, and so Overmaster. Let's see if they can get there. They've got lethal. Can they spot lethal here?
There's so many big plays, and it looks like
it looks like
it. This looks like the sequence. Sure enough, and we're gonna find the moment of truth. Yep.
Oh yeah. Okay, there we go. Overmaster gets there.
Finds the line, and here we see out of nowhere. I mean, wasn't it just last turn the Flash was at 27?
Yeah, and this is 1 over lethal, and that's gonna let Overmaster advance here to the top 8. Both of our Scream decks that we've seen have made top 8, and yeah, they've put up some impressive numbers here.
Yep, and that was the end of the round, meaning that we're going to be going to top 8 and seeing, I guess at this point we've cut down the field from 32 to 8. We're getting down to it. This is getting to the nitty-gritty where we're going to see who exactly is going to emerge victorious from our test event this weekend.
So let's take a look at the bracket, see who we've got left here. You see Notorious GHP winning their round. They're going to be facing against Koyut here. And then Secret Caveman facing Cranky Panda. Gonna be the match on the other side of the bracket. And then on top here, Dunkelwerk won their second round as well. We saw them battle against Grimfan in round 1, facing against Nephilim. So that's a Haunting Scream deck facing against a kind of a tri-faction control deck here. And it'll be interesting to see who emerges victorious. Looks like we are going to be taking a bit of a break in between the top 16 and the top 8. Give the players and, of course, the casters a chance to take a little break. So we'll be back in just a couple minutes here with the top 8 of our Eternal Test event.
End of the road, friend.
Hey everyone, welcome back to our Eternal Test event. I'm Luis Scott Vargas here with Patrick Chapin, and I hope we're all very refreshed after our luxurious 5-minute break. The first time we ran one of these, me and Sullivan were here for the full 5 hours back to back or whatever, and it was a lot of fun. But it is a lot of action. One of the advantages of being on the kind of digital medium is that we just get to go game to game to game, so not a lot of downtime.
Yeah, and that's all right. It's kind of fun just having it be nothing but excitement, car chases, battling back and forth,
explosions. It cuts down on the kind of aimless rants, though. I think people like those too. So
if you want an aimless rant, we can.
Oh yeah, we've got the guy for it. So we are coming back here with our top 8. It's going to be starting in just a second here. We're going to, continue looking at the bracket as the day develops, and we're going to see who our champion eventually is. Just to run down, I guess, the tournament structure a little bit for those just tuning in. We started with 32 players out of 3,000, or over 3,000, actually. That's how many people participated in our test event, which is awesome. Bodes well for our qualifiers. Those, above 3,000 people played 24 games, and it looks like everyone with 20-4 record made it in.
Yep, the cut was some of the 19-5s.
Right, and some of the 19-5s made it in, and a couple of them missed. So it looks like with the 24 games, if you want to be safe, go 24, go 19-5, and kind of take your chances there. I personally would choose to have more wins rather than fewer, but that's just my method when approaching tournaments.
Yeah, I mean it's even a seeded tournament, so you want to get the best seeding you possibly can too.
So you end up, cutting to a top 32, and that top 32 gets played out today here on Sunday. We're playing best 2 out of 3, single elimination. So we've gone from 32 players down to 8, and we'll soon be down to 4.
Yeah, I mean this is very exciting, and we've seen both fast and big strategies, and it looks like we're going to be coming into a match in which we're seeing a couple more strategies that we haven't seen yet. An Argenport mid-range deck using a lot of removal, but a lot of big, big threats that you can play on each spot on the curve, just trying to have a board presence and play with the best quality you can while picking apart your opponent's defense. But on the other side, we're going to be seeing a Fire Justice Shadow, another take on this sort of, some would say it was an Ikaria deck, or it has been an Ikaria deck at some point, but by having access to those fire cards, things like Torch and Rizan add some powerful different dimensions, and there's also just a lot more charge in the 3-faction style.
Yeah, and these two decks are, we're going to see a lot of battling in terms of card advantage, not just in terms of board position. So because both decks have sweepers, both decks have a fair amount of removal, a lot of what's going to decide these games is who can get ahead on cards and stay ahead on cards.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the threats can be an implied 2-for-1 or a lot of value of sort of the Sky King coming down can do a lot of work, but at the end of the day, every +1 from privilege rank, every smart scout decision, every use of the merchant, they're all going to add up, because this is unlikely to be a game that just gets decided in the first 5 turns. This is definitely one in which both players are going to be trying to build an advantage.
So it looks like we have one of the players' deck lists ready, so let's take a look at that. This is the Cranky Panda deck list. We've got Fire Justice Shadow mid-range. So here you see Ixtun Merchant getting a good, well-balanced market. We have Boar to destroy enemy attachments, Cauldron Cookbook for long-term card advantage, and then a couple different threats. Statuary Maiden is one of the more defensive ones, Rizan as the slightly bigger way to stabilize, and then Ikaria as a way to finish the game. So of note, there's no power in the market to go get. Is that something you tend to favor?
It depends on my deck, but I'd say I actually, the majority of the time lately, have been playing without a power in my market, because I actually just like playing extra power in my deck itself that I can put into the market later and then pull one out. I'd rather have a little too much than too little.
So it sounds like our top 8 is ready, so we're going to get right down to the game. We've got Cranky Panda coming right up.
End of the road, friend.
Alrighty, welcome to the top heat here of our Eternal Test event reunion. I'm Lou Scott Vargas here with Patrick Chapin, and we're watching Cranky Panda on top there with the Fire Justice Shadow mid-range deck play against Secret Caveman with the kind of Argent Port mid-range deck, and you even see, you know, Wanted poster, Privilege of Rank. Like, Secret Caveman is gearing up for the long game.
Oh yeah, and I think Cranky Panda is not exactly, isn't. Cranky Panda, even though wants to build some card advantage, doesn't want the game to go nearly as long. I mean, once you're playing 3 Cauldron cookbooks with a 4th cookbook in the market, you want to build an advantage, build some card advantage, but you want to get the game over with before you have to pay the piper.
And here you see Secret Caveman, you know, also touching Primal, by the way. You can see a little Primal. Oh, it looks like Caveman is playing the Crest of Cunning. This is what we talked about before. No Primal cards, just Crest of Cunning in order to get extra, shots at scouting.
Oh, and a Justice Sigil is the best draw here, right? Like with Privilege Rank now turned on, this is a lot more action for Secret Caveman to keep things going and not just be relying on a Vara Crush Your Fingers.
So if we take a look at Cranky Panda's avatar there, they do have a Cauldron Cookbook in play, and this is the exact right matchup for it. Cauldron Cookbook gives you a good long-term advantage, but does get more dangerous the more times you use it.
And here, Vara coming down, normally a real big board presence, but against a deck like this where they have the access to so many cards like Slay and Harsh Roll, she's not necessarily at her best. It is interesting, though, the cookbook giving Cranky Panda that extra power. I mean, the cookbook's a lot cheaper to operate than some other card draw options like the Moon Dial. If you're willing to take a chance, you can get the extra card advantage much more efficiently.
And last turn we saw Cranky Panda decide just to play Slay and to not risk missing a power drop. They could have cast Quarry looking for a power and cast Slay. They could have also used the cookbook and then hoped to hit a power, but they just decided to play it conservatively, which makes a lot of sense given the disadvantage of the cookbook. You want to keep your health total as high as possible when you've got a bunch of firebombs in your deck.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Cranky Panda doesn't want to get into a spot of having to decline to cook the books. They want to be pressing their luck as much as they can, because even though they got some pretty good things going right now, Secret Caveman having a full grip, it means that there's a lot of stuff that Cranky Panda is going to have to fight through. And it's not like Secret Caveman's strategy isn't without some options to go big. I mean,
we just saw a really funny play there, by the way. Quarry saw end of the story and Firebomb. Cranky Panda wisely declined to take the Firebomb, and that actually negates it. It just goes right to the void, and Destiny does not happen. So
sick.
That worked out very nicely for Cranky Panda. If you can time your quarries right, then I guess you can get a pretty big edge in getting around the cookbook's disadvantage.
Absolutely. And one of the other big options, it's not going to come up in this matchup, obviously, but one of the other big kind of interactions that we've been seeing a lot over the last few days is how much Cauldron Cookbook is such a foil to Azendel. If you can cook the books enough, sometimes the Azendel player ends up in a spot where they accidentally just draw 3 firebombs off your deck.
Yeah, I've definitely had that happen, and it is not exactly what you're aiming for.
So Secret Caveman really getting punished for having so much interaction for units, instead of any sort of a way to deal with the Cauldron Cookbook, and without any sort of pressure. What's Secret Caveman going to have to do to turn this around, besides just continue to hang out and hope for firebombs?
That Sword of the Sky King needs to get probably 2 hits in to really put Secret Caveman in a good spot. And given all those removal spells, maybe Secret Caveman can pull that off. But because Cranky Panda can, at the very worst, get Boar with Ixtun Merchant, then I think that they're going to end up in a spot where they're able to answer that Sword of the Sky King one way or another.
We see Devastating Setback pulling a Slay down. Not a particularly important option right now, but neither were the Torches or the Quarry or the end of the story. The big thing that Devastating Setback does not have access to, however, is that Ixtun Merchant and its ability to go get Boar. Definitely a lot different of an experience when these discard spells only give you partial information, and in this spot leave there a lot of gameplay to be had, of a lot of gamesmanship of, I know something you don't know, how can I use this to my advantage?
Here you see Cranky Panda continuing to favor just using the cookbook rather than deploy anything to the board, and that might come back to bite them just a little bit here, because Sword of the Sky King is going to come down and just definitely Secret Caveman is just going to go for that big hit.
Oh yeah, I mean, 16 is still a ways away. But if you can get one Nightfall trigger and 3 firebombs.
Yeah, we are definitely counting Cranky Panda's health total in firebombs at this point. Firebomb units are exactly where you want to be. So the devastating setback from Cranky Panda is going to give them a lot of information. They get to see 4 of Secret Caveman's 5 cards, and that's going to set up them using Ixtun Merchant to go get a board to kill that Sword of the Sky King.
Yeah, and that devastating setback was a turn late of what you'd like. However, Ixtun Merchant gladly solves the one big thing Secret Caveman has going for them. Now, I personally would, I would have liked to draw another Ixtun Merchant because I love the play of go get the boar the Sword of the Sky King, then use the second merchant to put the boar back in the market. You might need it later, and you kind of free roll it.
Oh yeah, that's of course the sequence you're hoping to hit. And Secret Caveman now is in a lot of trouble. They were in a lot of trouble before, but at least when they had Sword of the Sky King, they could pretend they had a chance. Now they're really going to need a lot of firebombs to show up for Cranky Panda because they're just down so many cards. I still think Cranky Panda is safe to continue using Cauldron Cookbook, though.
I think they need to use the cookbook, too, because they need to press the advantage while they can. I mean, with a Harsh Rule, an Annihilate, an End of the Story, Secret Caveman actually has access to a lot of defense, so that even if they take a hit from Rizan on the way in, they can kill the Ixtun Merchant, they can kill the Rizan. They've actually got a fair bit of defense. Cranky Panda needs to get more advantage going.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if Cranky Panda actually even wants to play the Rizan, given that they have, already a 3-strength unit just getting some hits in here. So it is because remember, Cranky Panda saw Secret Caveman's hand. They know about both Harsh Rule and End of the Story.
I think they're cooking the books.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they just kept putting firebombs in their deck, kept drawing cards, and we'll just basically force Secret Caveman to answer every card 1-1.
We need to get we gotta get a cookbook counter up here. How many firebombs are now juggling in the mix? Because this is actually,
I want to say like 4. I think they've used it maybe 5 times, and one's already in the void, kind of undetonated thanks to the quarry.
Oh yeah, you just got to know which. Is it the blue wire or the red wire? And here we see Vara coming down, and very likely, I mean, do you even bother sacrificing the Ixtun Merchant, or is this just going to eat like a couple of torches?
I think this might be an opportunity to either trade 2 torches or use Torch plus Rizan's ability to take down the Vara. And even if you play Rizan and all of a sudden get Harsh Rolled, you still remove Vara from the board, and that ends up, I think, working out fairly nicely for you.
Interesting. So Ixtun Merchant, and this is actually kind of fake in that if Vara blocks, it's not like the Ixtun Merchant can't just finish the job with 2 torches and have the overwhelm damage go through. I mean, this is kind of going to be an interesting spot, though, for seeing. And Secret Caveman decides to take the hit and not even force the issue.
And remember, both players have access to a fair amount of information here, thanks to Sabotage. Secret Caveman also knows about those torches and has decided they don't want to trade Vara for Torch plus Ixtun Merchant.
Absolutely, and what they don't know about is the Rizan.
So Cranky Panda has a couple options here. They can use Double Torch to clear Vara. They can use Torch plus Rizan. They could even just cast one of their own sweepers if they really wanted to. And I think no matter how they do this, they're going to end up trading kind of like 2 cards for Vara, but I still think that's fine given the cookbook here.
Man, just keep cooking the books. The second Cauldron, not at its best, but it does give you something to stick into the market later. Interesting. So we see Harsh Rule come down. And now Secret Caveman with 4 interaction spells. Like, this is actually a tough spot. I mean, you got to start to wonder at a certain point, oh, wow. And with Sword of the Sky King coming up next, this is just not lined up the way that Secret Caveman wants it all.
No, and I would be sorely tempted to just play Sword of the Sky King and just start going to town if I were Cranky Panda. You know about already like 2 to 3 of the cards in Secret Caveman's hand, and that also gives you extra insurance against Fireball. The sword does protect you there.
Man, Tavrog, great card, great against 2 torches, not that good against Sword of the Sky King.
No, and I don't even think Sword will even hit Tavrod thanks to that End of the Story in hand. I think Cranky Panda will be more than happy to just clear the cow out of the way and just keep hitting with the sword.
And we are really seeing the benefit of this this having a fire base instead of just the Argenport interaction cards. With the card draw from the cookbook has given Cranky Panda so many options, and then some of the cards like Rizan and Torch are able to be so much more proactive than Secret Caveman's extra use of removal. that can only hit units.
And that'll finish off the game. Cranky Panda, a flurry of torches, ending a game that was already going to end in their favor anyway, but you might as well just end it there. And
well, I mean, there's enough firebombs in the deck.
Yeah, that's
Every
true.
turn.
You could chain 4 firebombs. You always have outs. One of the things I've learned about playing against the cookbook is you never concede. They could always just hit all their firebombs.
Yep. There's always firebomb equity.
So at what point does Cranky Panda get upgraded to Happy Panda? I guess they have to win the event, probably.
I mean, I've known some pandas in my day, and I think winning the event is a good step in the right direction for being temporarily less cranky, but you never know.
So there we saw a game pretty much dominated by the cookbook. It was kind of the star of the show because both players were sitting on a bunch of ways to answer the opposing cards, except critically, Secret Caveman couldn't answer the cookbook, and the cookbook meant that Cranky Panda had access to 5-6 additional cards over the course of the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we knew was going to be a part of the equation for the cookbook is just how much it preys on people who play too defensive, who aren't willing to be a little aggressive.
All right, and game 2 is ready here, so we're going to head down and see if the books get cooked.
End of the road, friend.
Alrighty, here we see Cranky Panda redrawing into a pretty solid hand. Both players kind of on the hardcast privilege of rank plan. They both have sideways ways to get it going on. Tavrod can flip it for Secret Caveman. Quarry, if you get really lucky, can flip it for Cranky Panda. But both of them are pretty happy just casting 3 cost, get 2 Justice Sigils.
Yeah, I mean, they're both trying to build up to 8 power and play for a long game. And so in some ways, Privilege of Rank is sort of the justice answer to Wisdom of the Elders. That Devastating Setback is interesting. That's one of my personal favorite ways to trigger Privilege of Rank is my opponent Devastating Setbacks.
And having no other option.
But here, sort of the Sky King is probably going to be a juicier target.
So normally with Devastating Setback, you get flexibility, right? Because it's good against hordes of small units and it's good against slower decks. You pay a bit of a cost because it costs 3. It's not super efficient, but in these matchups, it's really good. Getting able to strip a Sword of the Sky King is just so good for Secret Caveman there.
And just having the information to know not only did you get the Sword of the Sky King, you know that as of your turn, they didn't have Slay, they didn't have Torch, they didn't have Harsh Rule. Like, some of this information can really matter when you have stuff like Tavrod in your deck, for instance, and you just want to clear a path.
Oh man, Cranky Panda 1 turn away from getting their Privilege of Rank sabotaged, though given that Secret Caveman saw just Privilege of Rank the turn before, I bet they weren't in a hurry to cast that sabotage. And in fact, they may just not even cast it here. It looks like they did not.
Yeah, and so there's this interesting question of whether you should wait on Tavrod at all or just play it out as soon as possible. In general, you want to clear the path, but Secret Caveman saw the path was clear last turn, and here Cranky Panda just so happened to draw a Slay on this turn.
Yeah, well, a saying that we've had for a long time is discard does not have protection from nonsense, as it's normally said. And you really can't protect yourself from the top of their deck. You can cast as many sabotages as you want. If their top card's still a Slay, they're still going to get to cast a Slay.
And here, Keratin Merchant opens up additional options for Secret Caveman. I mean, going long, one of the most key parts of Secret Caveman's game plan is the ability to Azendal's Gift. Now, you still have to deal with Ixtun Merchant, because the Ixtun Merchant could potentially bore the Azendal's Gift. But this is actually just sort of the Secret Caveman answer to the Cauldron Cookbook for trying to win the game going long.
You also have Burglarize in case you have a chance to snipe the cookbook. Though both of
Ooh, that's a big game, actually.
Both of those are somewhat answered by Ixtun Merchant getting bore. Though at this point, maybe Secret Caveman's looking at just casting Harsh Rule in order to set up this Tavrod next turn.
Yeah, I mean, if you Harsh Rule here, you get to follow up with a Sabotage and a Tavrod in the same turn, which can be a very attractive play.
Yeah, that's going to work out pretty well for Secret Caveman. Though, at this point, Cranky Panda, if they're worried about getting that cookbook out, they can, in the same turn, Merchant and play cookbook in order to really start getting things going.
Oh, yeah. So, and here it looks like we might be just seeing exactly that. I mean, Cranky Panda having access to the cookbook already and just starting to press that puts Secret Caveman in a position of, do they just continue with their play of Sabotage into Tavrod, or do they just set up the guaranteed Keratin Merchant for Burglarize next turn? And it looks like that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, the Privilege of Rank gives you an extra Justice Sigil, and Burglarize, Cranky Panda has to guess that that's what's coming. I think that they're wise in the ways of the merchants, and that doesn't mean they have an answer here. Maybe they can try to quarry and find Sabotage. Oh wow, if they keep that Sabotage on top, quarry into it, Sabotage, that's going to be the downside of the way Secret Caveman chose to run this turn.
Yep, and here we see the sort of split that Sabotage and Shakedown put people in. If that had been a Shakedown on top, it'd be looking so brilliant, getting the merchant down and burglarizing your hand. But now by swapping, Sabotage is able to take down the burglarize where it would not have been able to hit the merchant.
All right, that's a great point, because from Secret Caveman's perspective, they were doing a good job of playing around Shakedowns, but this is kind of the advantage you get off of mixing the types of cards you have. It makes your opponent unable to fully play around everything you have.
And, obviously Secret Caveman not thrilled to see a quarry still left in the chamber, but taking down the sleigh means that Cranky Panda's under the gun. One hit from Tavrod, and, Secret Caveman's going to be in a much better position. Tavrod is, in some ways, Secret Caveman's answer to the cookbook. That's, if you can Tavrod goes hard when Tavrod goes.
Tavrod's like using a Cauldron cookbook, but you're just hitting them with a firebomb instead.
Dude, I love when I'm Tavrodding and I just put the firebombs into the void.
Oh yeah. So we're chaining quarries here, seeing if you can quarry into quarry into quarry. Cranky Panda's digging. Are they going to find an answer? There's not that many cards that answer Tavrod on the amount of power they have left, though. So it's kind of like Slayer Bust for this turn, though. Actually, Vara does give you an answer to Tavrod, so
it's better than nothing.
The stats line up exactly, so Tavrod can't attack into Vara. So Secret Caveman, it's on them to draw an answer here.
Yeah, unless you just if you have enough relic weapons in your deck, and what you're just feeling is that you're like, man, I'm willing to throw away my Tavrod just on the chance, because if I can find an Orc Runehammer, it obviously it's just so brutal to try to just roll the dice from this spot, because if you miss, now you're behind a Vara. And Vara in the cookbook's a great combo anyway. Vara giving that extra health. Every Vara hit is one more firebomb that Cranky Panda could endure going long. Alternatively, though, Secret Caveman could just play out another Vara or a Tavrod and, build for next turn. Have a big play next turn.
So if things don't change here, if Cranky Panda just whiffs on this cookbook, then it looks like Secret Caveman's going to just get to hit past Vara, and then Cranky Panda's going to keep their Vara back to stop Tavrod. So it's possible that we have a bit of a standoff with one Vara hit getting through every turn, but Cranky Panda drawing multiple cards turn off, now multiple cookbooks.
Oh, see, here I think it's worth you just got to attack, because even when Vara takes down the Tavrod, that Auric Runehammer being able to finish the job, that's a game changer.
Note the last two draws of Secret Caveman were cards that Tavrod could have hit. Let's see if Tavrod now whiffs. Looks like Tavrod does now.
That's what I'm telling you. If you're going to play Tavrod, you got to know when it's time. You got to just believe in the heart of the cards.
So this is still a good exchange. Both players are going to come out of this feeling okay. Cranky Panda's certainly the one who needs some more help, but they traded a Vara for a Tavrod and blocked a Runehammer hit, so now it's Vara plus Runehammer, which is a lot, versus multiple cookbooks. We'll see how powerful these cookbooks can be.
Yeah, and the second cookbook is actually relevant here, because even though obviously that just speeds up a little bit the spot at which you get into danger, you were going to cook the books next turn anyway, so if you've got nothing better to do, cooking them twice is definitely on the table. I mean, you got to get something going, because this Auric Runehammer this turn, it's pretty close to a Firebomb a turn itself, and with Tavrod coming down, Cranky Panda needs to find some action in a hurry. Now, that Ixtun Merchant has some interesting options between Rizan's ability to get a little extra health, Ikaria just having a huge board presence, and Statuary Maiden actually able to contain Tavrod if everything goes well. If you can actually deal with that Auric Runehammer first. There's a lot of big options here. Yeah,
I think I would favor getting something more proactive. It feels like getting something like Rizan would be a pretty good way to do that. Because even if Secret Caveman's last card is Harsh Rule, spoiler, it is, you still took down the Runehammer and got yourself a couple of health, so your cookbooks can get back to work.
Right, and if Tavrod gets in here, it's not like Tavrod is for sure going to draw two cards. It might, but at least the Rizan and the Ixtun Merchant can take Tavrod down. And Tavrod's only going to get one of the two of them for the trouble.
Yeah, I definitely like running the double block here. And that's not just because I can see Secret Caveman's hand. I think that it's really hard to let your Tavrod just keep hitting you, especially when you have multiple cookbooks going.
Oh yeah, and with Tavrod missing, like that's one of the things that happens if you get greedy and you just don't play very many Minotaur and very many weapons in your deck, and you're just like, Tavrod draw a card half the time, that's fine. If you're gonna get greedy and play with so little, you have to just take your lumps and have Tavrod miss some of the time.
A lot of what Tavrod is doing in this deck appears to me is just getting there on stats alone, just a 5/7 endurance for 5. And every now and then you do pick up an extra card, but it's not like the old Argenport mid-range decks that were hitting above 80% of the time with Tavrod. This deck, it feels like, well, we've seen two swings, no hits. My guess is it's maybe a little bit better than 50-50, probably less than 50-50 to hit most of the time.
And I'm loving Cranky Panda's position now. I mean, with 2 cookbooks going, a slight advantage on the board, a slight health total advantage, and a full grip. Secret Caveman's going to have to put something together in a hurry, or just try to stretch for Firebomb equity. At what point does Cranky Panda chill on the book cooking?
Well, I think once you have Sword of the Sky King and Rizan, you could probably just take a little break. Though at this point, it's not like Cranky Panda's realistically going to die to Firebombs anyway. One of the incentives that the cookbook gives you is to play cards that increase your health, increase your armor, so that you have a little bit of backup when you have a bunch of Firebombs floating in your deck.
Oh, this is interesting. This Orc Runehammer coming down can chip away half of the Sword of the Sky King's total, and put Secret Caveman in a position to actually be making some progress in the event that Cranky Panda draws a Firebomb. And here we see Caveman deciding to hold off a turn and save the Runehammer for the Rizan itself. Although, actually, man, it's tough, though, because now you kind of need 2 Firebombs to solve the... Oh, man. Who doesn't want the Firebomb sweat?
The Firebomb equity is real, but I think Cranky Panda was going to take down that game, if the game went any longer anyway. So we see Cranky Panda cook the books on the way to a top 8 victory. They've moved on to the top 4 here. Our producers scouring the tournament for other matches, but that match could have gone a lot longer. Those 2 decks are poised to play really long games. Turns out Cranky Panda just had cookbook advantage both games, and both games that actually did make the difference.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were talking from the inception of Into Shadow that Cauldron Cookbook would be an appealing Ixtun merchant target, but the use of 3+1 is definitely pressing your luck to a degree that we saw pay off big here.
Well, and as good as it was in that match, remember that when your opponent is aggressively attacking your health total and playing to the board, Firebombs or not, you sometimes can't afford to pay 3 every turn to not advance your game plan. So there are matchups where the cookbook doesn't look quite as good, but that's like one of the absolute best places for the cookbook.
Oh, absolutely. And I can't help but wonder about the Sabotage Keratin Merchant sort of that turn. There's so many ways that you could have played that with regards to Sabotage, Tavrod, what to merchant for.
Yeah, that was a tricky game.
It's very confusing. There's so many different ways that things could go, and I think we saw a pretty good one.
So, looks like our round is done. That match actually did bring us to the top 4, but we've got a bracket. So let's go ahead and take a look at the bracket and see who we've got. We kicked things off watching Dunkelwerk. Dunkelwerk has made it down to the top 4. We'll be playing against Notorious GHB, and then we've got Cranky Panda against the Overmaster. So, wow, today's a good day to be screaming here, it looks like.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Haunting Scream has been out in force, and here we might actually get a chance to see Cranky Panda attempt to fight the good fight and defend against the screaming gunslingers and Yeti. What an odd pairing.
Yeah. So that round is going to be starting here soon, and yeah, we're going to kick things off by watching Cranky Panda. We'll see if they've got the right recipe here for victory. And we've had a lot of really fast games, like compared to our last tournament. We actually saw these games go quite a bit faster, and I wonder how much that has to do with the fact that we haven't seen, for example, Temporal Control kind of rear its head here.
Yeah, I mean, some of the temporal control decks definitely, obviously take a hit from some of the numbers changes, but also in a format where people are playing Haunting Scream type of cards to punish anybody who wants to rely on Harsh Rule, and playing Cauldron Cookbook to punish anybody who's playing too much interaction and playing very slow. We're seeing a lot of decks that are just naturally very, very good against any sort of a super slow control deck anyway.
Yeah, this might not be the right time for that deck, even if even counting the fact that Channel the Tempest now costs 9 instead of 8.
Interestingly, so much Azendel early in the event, so many Azendels rising to the top 32, but then Haunting Scream doing what it was built to do and preying on these decks, and here we see this is definitely Haunting Scream's weekend, unless Cranky Panda can toe the line.
It's also interesting because as the metagame evolves, for example, if Haunting Scream does really well, maybe that it lets people know they should play more Desert Marshals. There are a lot of ways to go back and forth depending on what the current threats are, and it'll be interesting to see how much the metagame from this event, because we're going to be posting the top 32 deck lists later, will dictate what the metagame looks like over the next week or 2 weeks.
Oh yeah. I mean, last event we saw quite an influence from the event into the ranked queues in the weeks that follow, and I would not be surprised if there's some moving and shaking as a result of the stuff people have come up with for this event.
Yeah, and how people adjust also to the mix of Shakedown versus Sabotage, like all these things. There's a lot of card choices that can go into it, and it looks like we've got our game ready, so we're going to head down to the top 4 match.
End of the road, friend.
Alrighty, welcome to the top 4 here at our reunion test event. We've got the Overmaster on top playing Haunting Scream, facing down against Cranky Panda playing Fire Justice Shadow mid-range. And one of the things that Cranky Panda's deck relies on in order to make the deck work are cards like Quarry. You see here Cranky Panda has no Justice influence at all, but Quarry makes you feel not so bad about that.
Oh yeah, I mean the ability to not only look for Justice Sigils, but in a perfect world find Privilege rank.
Oh man.
And it really does a lot to help pull together a deck that still uses double and triple Justice cards despite needing so much Fire and Shadow.
So at this point, Cranky Panda has access to multiple different spells that look at the opponent's hand between Devastating Setback and Sabotage, which is kind of a nice combination because you can cast one and see whether the second is worth casting.
Oh yeah, but Devastating Setback though definitely super important in this matchup. Anyway, being able to hit the Grenadin tokens and being able to go after cards like Champion of Fury, Dusk Raider, and Bandit Queen, Carroted Merchant, it's actually just a very, very effective sweeper. Both sides are so important. This is definitely one of the matchups where Cranky Panda is getting paid for being willing to pay the cost to have the extra flexibility that Devastating Setback affords.
Unfortunately for Cranky Panda, they don't have an answer to Crunch, so Crunch is gonna do as the name suggests and get a hit in here.
Oh yeah, and the first hit from Crunch is definitely the hardest, unless the second one is because of Berserk. Cranky Panda is not without some amount of defense though. Even without that Devastating Setback, Statuary Maiden can come down and hopefully do a little bit of bridging, because even if the Overmaster combusts it, that's one less threat that the Overmaster has to continue the assault with.
There's also a slight chance that Overmaster just discards the Combust. I don't think it's very big, but it's possible they are more worried about just keeping all of their threats, and they don't anticipate Cranky Panda playing very many units because Cranky Panda doesn't have very many units. So we could actually see that play end up happening as well.
Yeah, I mean, discarding the Combust, sure enough, we do see it. It gives the Berserk to Crunch, which is definitely kind of a high risk, high reward play. And it's threatening a lot, but remember, the Overmaster doesn't know that Statuary Maiden's coming down next turn. Statuary Maiden definitely not revealed from the Sabotage, and now Cranky Panda's actually looking pretty good. Carroted Merchant's the big wild card.
I think Overmaster may have a Combust in their market, and they in fact do. So at the very worst, Carroted Merchant is a 4-cost, slow kill unit here. So we're going to see that happen and get the Statuary Maiden out of the way for this pair of Yetis to continue reducing Cranky Panda's health total.
How big of a deal do you think that +2/+2 Cudgel is? I mean, it's potentially a free card to stick in your market if it comes to that. It's potentially a way to make Rizon a bigger threat. How much does it even matter?
I don't think it's going to change the impact or the outcome of the game very much here, because if you land a Rizon, if Cranky Panda can live long enough to play Rizon, which definitely not a given here, they need something to bridge the gap this turn. Oh, that something is named Vara. then I think that the Cudgel's not going to do that much.
Ooh, this is interesting. So committing to playing the Crest this turn means that Rizon is online for next turn if you can live, but it means that Vara doesn't get to wear a Cudgel.
And at this point, Overmaster doesn't have another removal spell easily accessible because they've already gone through the Combust in their market. So that Carendon Merchant can't grab an answer to Vara that Overmaster can cast right away.
And with that crunch having Reckless, this is actually kind of a dangerous spot, right? I mean, that's one of the double-edged, one of the drawbacks of Berserk is putting yourself in a position where now your hand is kind of forced. You gotta make something happen.
I'm really surprised that Overmaster chose not to sacrifice Crunch to Vara. I think that they may have been hoping to find an answer next turn, because at this point, Crunch, having Reckless and attacking into Vara is going to be a pretty big advantage for Cranky Panda. Like, I think Cranky Panda is going to be able to go Vara into Rizon, and potentially stabilize.
Man, that is a heck of a 5-6-7. Now, what kind of a play can he set up with this Carendon Merchant, though, right? Like, I mean, Madness is definitely an option. Haunting Scream is kind of a funny option. Dark Return is that part of the equation. This is a lot of plays. I mean, without having an extra power, you don't have access to the like Devour Crunch buyout. But, man, there's just, the Overmaster's market has so many different avenues that could be explored here.
So one of the things you notice when playing card games is when your opponent goes in the tank for a really long time, that is often a sign they do not have a good play. And I think Overmaster has a really tough decision here, and none of the things that end up happening this turn are going to be particularly great for Overmaster. So I think that Overmaster's unhappy with all their options, rightfully so, and that's going to lead Cranky Panda to have a pretty big advantage this game.
Man, and we are really seeing the Overmaster get punished for the greed, you could say, of wanting to keep that crunch around. But with Rizon coming down, oh man, that Carendon Merchant biting the dust, Vara can actually just start getting in there.
Yeah, and this is the advantage to having all these lifesteal units. Look at, all of a sudden, Cranky Panda's at 22. They're the aggressor now.
Yeah, I mean, man, this is going to be tough. What does the Overmaster need to do in order to turn this around? I mean, you always have access to potentially setting up some sort of a Madness combo, but with just things like Bandit Queen and Vicious Highwayman, is anything the Overmaster's doing even as good as Vara and Rizon?
Really not. Like, the lifesteal units are one of the best ways to fight against the Haunting Scream deck. Like, they are vulnerable to Madness. Any big unit's going to be, but it just puts you so far ahead and makes it so you're not worried about removing Overmaster's units, because what the Haunting Scream decks are good against is removal. They're pretty good at fighting against a lot of different kinds of removal, especially slow removal, but against a 5-6 lifesteal and a 5-4 lifesteal, soon to be followed up by another 5-4 lifesteal, best Overmaster can do is to attack in for 8 here using Bandit Queen, but that progress is going to be negated in just one turn, and if Cranky Panda draws a power, then that Cudgel actually comes out to play too.
And it is interesting that, the Overmaster is able to... and just any of these Scream decks in general, able to dodge Vanquish or make Vanquish kind of awkward to use at times, but it's small consolation when Rizon and Vara are just giving them the business. And here we see that Cudgel after all, which means that the Overmaster isn't just on a one-turn clock. That Rizon in the air is potentially lethal all by itself, to say nothing of Rizon number 2 following up and likely taking down, Champion of Fury for even more board presence.
Yeah, at this point, Overmaster is facing down an opponent who's at 29 health and has 3 gigantic threats, one of which is lethal, the other 2 of which are just going to put Overmaster in too big of a hole to climb out of. And we saw a game kind of turn pretty quickly. It all hinged on Cranky Panda drawing Vara on turn 5. Because, right before Cranky Panda drew Vara, what we were talking about is them needing something to bridge the gap, them needing something to let them survive to play Rizon, because Rizon does a fantastic job of stabilizing. Turns out Vara was that card.
Yep, and even though the Haunting Scream decks have been looking absolutely just fantastic today, man, maybe Cranky Panda's cracked the code. I mean, this is definitely an exciting combination of, having the card advantage to be able to actually grind out against anybody else playing Interaction, the big threats preying on, for instance, I mean, Rizon and Vara are just going to, and Ikaria are just going to go over the top of most of what the Haunting Scream deck is up to.
I especially like the combination of lifesteal units plus Cauldron Cookbook, because those cover a lot of your bases. The Cookbook's good against control, the lifesteal units are good against aggro, and it turns out that the combination of the two means that we could see games, and maybe some of the games earlier in this tournament that we didn't get a chance to see, where Cranky Panda just is using Cookbook against even an aggressive or mid-range deck and not worrying because of all their lifesteal units. Alrighty, so it looks like game 2 is ready to go, so let's head back down to the round.
End of the road, friend.
Alrighty, here we've got game 2. It looks like Cranky Panda's going to go for a redraw, and not the most inspiring of hands. This is similar to the last game, though Ictun Merchant offers a pretty good early play. Ooh, Warp has its downsides, and seeing into the story on top there is not exactly where you want to be if you're Cranky Panda.
Yep, but at least fortunately having access to Quarry, one of the best draw smoothing cards in the game, does mean the Cranky Panda has hopes of things going a little bit better next turn. As for the Overmaster, they've wasted no time coming out swinging. Grenadin Drone into Dusk Raider, potentially into a Champion of Fury and or Bandit Queen in the next couple of turns is a very aggressive opening. Yeah, the Cookbook looking a little slow in a spot like this.
yeah, you could say that. And Cranky Panda takes a Fire Sigil, declining to take a Harsh Rule. Ooh, this one's going to be a little harder to win, especially since Overmaster drawing that the Crest of Fury into Champion of Fury is just a nice combination. Unsurprisingly, they both involve the word Fury, and we're going to see a pretty big hit here. Doesn't have Berserk, wasn't drawn after the Dusk Raider here, but this is still a hit for 8 when Cranky Panda is not casting a whole lot of relevant cards.
Wow, and with the Crest of Glory potentially being depleted, I mean, what choice does Cranky Panda have besides just, I mean, there's either play the Crest and kill the Champion of Fury for sure, or play Ixtin Merchant and hope that it will be good as a blocker.
It looks like Cranky Panda's going to go with the Vanquish play, kind of hope that Overmaster doesn't have a Haunting Scream. But Overmaster sitting on a Bandit Queen, which is going to be very close to lethal. That's, 2, 4, 7, 11
right
damage. Putting Cranky Panda to 3 and having the backup of Combust plus Madness if Cranky Panda were to play a single unit. So this already looks like we're heading to a game 3.
Yeah, I mean, and Vicious Highwayman having Berserk is an implied 13 right there. I mean, the ability for Vicious Highwayman to attack twice, Cranky Panda is just so behind the gun. You cannot wait until the 3rd turn when you're on the draw in order to interact with the Scream decks when they come out with all cylinders firing like we just saw here.
Yeah, and one of the things the Scream decks do really well is play from ahead. I mean, it may sound silly to say that because when you're ahead, and that's good for almost any deck. But it turns out like the control decks, they play pretty well from behind. They're not that worried about getting ahead. That's not really what the deck's about. The Scream deck is really about pressing the advantage, and they punish slow draws.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of sacrificing of card power in order to have speed. They've got their share of powerful cards. I mean, Haunting Scream, Champion of Fury, Bandit Queen, no slouches, but a little bit less of the super dramatic effects like Harsh Rule and the super card draw of the Cookbook.
So we're going to see whether Cranky Panda can take the advantage of going first, because I think in this matchup, it is very big. And we'll see if they can actually have a hand that involves some early Justice plays, because the last couple of games we saw them digging for Justice later in the game, but they're playing a 3-faction deck, as is their opponent, and that is kind of what you get when you end up dipping into more than just 2 factions.
Oh, yeah. The game looks like it's ready, and we're going to be jumping back down in there and seeing what...
End of the road, friend.
Alrighty, welcome to Game 3. Here in our top 4, we have the Overmaster on top, facing down against Cranky Panda. And this is an ideal hand for Cranky Panda, and a little less than ideal for Overmaster, though they do have the Madness plus Combust combo. What I really like if I'm Cranky Panda is the fact that my opening hand has a Torch and all 3 factions.
Yeah, absolutely. With Avara giving an implied way to actually get an advantage later on, the Overmaster, on the other hand, so many depleted power. And even, it's always tough when you're in the spot where you have the power that you need, but you're still slow, and so it's like, would you want to keep would you want to keep a Sigil? No, but it also means your Champion of Fury is going to be that much slower.
Though the funny thing is that actually works out kind of nicely for the Overmaster here, because you end up not playing Champion of Fury this turn when Cranky Panda would torch it, and now Cranky Panda is likely to just completely use all their power on Privilege of Rank and now get a hit in from the champion. So that's pretty funny. Ooh, we just got some stats. It looks like in this matchup, Cranky Panda's ahead 11-6 in the head-to-head. So these players have played 17 times before this. Cranky Panda is up 11-6. So that's a pretty funny addendum to this particular match.
I think that's well into the space of being a grudge match at this point. 17 matches?
That's a lot of matches.
And that's a lot of margin. 11-6. Cranky knows what they're doing. They know exactly. They're literally just defending, drawing cards, and hit for 4.
And again, it worked out nicely that this champion came down later rather than sooner, but Cranky Panda's still looking pretty good here. They even drew the Shadow Sigil, so they have the option of playing Vara, but I like playing it safe here. When you can just use your slow removal on an opposing unit here, I think it's better just to do that.
Oh, yeah, and the Overmaster having done nothing on the first 2 turns, it really implies that some sort of 4-strength charge threat is coming down, whether it's another Champion of Fury as we see here, or a Bandit Queen, or a Vicious Highwayman. Some sort of a big threat is coming next turn, and that Torch is going to get its money, and now Cranky Panda has effectively pulled a full turn ahead.
The funny thing about this next turn is if Cranky Panda just plays Vara, which is a pretty appealing play on an empty board, Overmaster can't actually use Combust Madness. There's no enemy units to use the Combust on.
Oh, wow, but that Devour changes the whole equation.
That Devour was a fantastic draw, and that's keeping Overmaster in this game. Without that Devour, I would say that Cranky Panda is well far ahead, but Devour means that Overmaster all of a sudden gets to drain Cranky Panda for 5 points of lifesteal damage and get rid of the Vara, drawing 2 more cards.
Oh, man. This is one of those spots where if Cranky Panda could just be cooking the books instead of dropping these big threats, man, you really need the discard sometimes just so you know what you're up against. Because I think that if Cranky Panda had been able to look at the Overmaster's hand, they would have played this very differently.
That said, we're now in the same position as before, minus the Devour. Overmaster has Madness Combust, but if Cranky Panda doesn't play a second unit, they can't combo off here, so that Rizon could keep getting hits in. Though it's going to be hard for Cranky Panda to resist playing out units given the makeup of their hand.
It's too. Oh, that Vara is just so juicy, it's so tempting. And if nothing else, Ixtun Merchant potentially setting up an Ikaria. Although normally you don't want a Vara and Ikaria at the exact same time. But
I could also see Ixtun Merchant setting up just another Rizon here. And at this point, I'd be tempted to get rid of that Harsh Rule. Like you're the one with all the units. You don't want to be
totally.
You don't want to end up having to pull the trigger on that Harsh Rule.
Yep, and it's not like that. That 7th power is for nothing. I mean, that 7th power represents one more step closer to Ikaria, but also just lots of options, like being able to play Slay and Vara in the same turn, for instance.
So Cranky Panda, this is going to be a pretty big turn. They do exchange Harsh Rule for Rizon. They're going to play conservatively, which makes sense given what they're up against. And even though Overmaster is going to get to Combust here, so they're still good. The Cranky Panda is still going to be in pretty good shape because Madness takes Rizon, hits in for 5. You Combust, sacrificing Rizon to kill the Ixtun Merchant, play Crunch, but then another Rizon comes down and kills Crunch.
Right, and remember, the Overmaster doesn't know for certain that it's Rizon that's coming next turn. Cranky Panda could just as easily have gotten Ikaria.
And if you wait on Crunch and Cranky Panda got Ikaria, you're in for a world of pain.
Right, but if you just play the Crunch and they got Rizon, man, so it's quite the fork.
And one of the things in Cranky Panda's favor here, even if Overmaster doesn't play Crunch, Cranky Panda can just play Vara.
Right, and does in fact decide to just play the Crunch.
I think it's really hard to resist playing Crunch there. I would be surprised if it was correct for Overmaster not to play it there. Even if you suspect there's a chance they get Rizon, the chance they get Ikaria is too high for you to risk that.
And here we see Rizon not only taking down Crunch, but helping buffer Cranky Panda's health total again. Oh, interestingly, plays the 8th power, meaning that the Ixtun Merchant has one less option for next turn of what to mark it away if it comes to that.
But it does open the door for Cranky Panda to go get an Ikaria. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the play we end up seeing over the next couple of turns here.
Yeah, I mean, the Overmaster cannot afford to come out particularly slowly against a deck like Cranky Pandas that can go so big. But the Overmaster is putting up a pretty big, putting up a fight here, continuing to get in. Bandit Queen having that. Oh, well, there we go.
Yeah, and at this point, Cranky Panda is well and firmly in control. They are already doing well, and they drew Sword of the Sky King here. So they have to. at this point, so when you get a really far ahead in a game, what you start looking at is how can I lose this game, not how can I win this game. Because Cranky Panda's going to win this game unless something weird happens. So what are the weird things that could happen? What is Cranky Panda trying to minimize here?
Well, for instance, one thing that could be part of the equation is you know that the Overmaster has Keratin Merchant. If they have a Burglarize, and they burglarize your Sword of the Sky King, a lot of things could go bad. Now, in this case, it turns out the Overmaster doesn't have a Burglarize, but Cranky Panda doesn't know that. There's a lot of, there's a lot of variables, a lot of options. A lot of people also don't realize this, but the Sword of the Sky King, it looks really, really big from the perspective that we're at. But it's a lot of people don't realize it's actually just in a little snow globe on Roland's desk. And even if Roland's dead, spoiler, the Sword of the Sky King continues to just sit there, exerting a small but very powerful presence.
Well, it looks like Cranky Panda, heeded your warning, decided not to play Sword of the Sky King, played a little more conservatively, but, oh wow, Overmaster's going to get to wipe the board here. Because of that Vara, they get to Keratin Merchant, trade Skycrag Banner for Combust, Madness, Combust, hit for a bunch. This game is not over. The Overmaster's fighting so hard with all these Madness, Combust. They've so far used Madness, Combust, Madness, Devour, and that's put them in a spot where they're very well able to deal with a lot of extremely resilient threats from Cranky Panda.
And here, if Cranky Panda had played the Sword of the Sky King, they still would have lost it. It could have come down a little bit differently, of course, but by killing the Bandit Queen, that's 3 damage on it. The Overmaster stealing the Rizon would have been enough to finish off the Sword of the Sky King. This game is very much anybody's game, really.
Nightfall pretty critical here, though devastating setback, living up to its name. It can wipe the board for a Cranky Panda, get a hit in with Sword of the Sky King, and Ixtun Merchant can go exchange that Sabotage for Nakaria. Wow, the ball's really in Cranky Panda's court, but remember, Night has fallen. Overmaster's going to get 2 draws next turn, and given the explosiveness of Haunting Scream, and the fact that Overmaster has a lot of units in their void thanks to those Madnesses, this game is not over yet, though it's looking very well in Cranky Panda's favor.
So that Torch is interesting. It does take down a Sword of the Sky King, potentially. Cranky Panda choosing to keep Sabotage, figuring that the 9th power, not a lot of utility, and if they end up using the Sabotage with Ikaria to help clear the way, great. If they don't, they could just pitch it to a future Merchant.
But Torch will take down Sword of the Sky King, but once Ikaria hits the board, the game tends not to last very long. This is going to put the Overmaster down to 10, leaving a Cranky Panda with an Ikaria back thanks to Endurance. Just going to give a lot of extra defense, even against, look, exactly that, Haunting Scream.
Now, what kind of options does the Overmaster have? I mean, Keratin Merchant is kind of interesting. I don't know if there's enough in your market that matters at this point.
Vara is pretty nice.
Vara is a big game. Vara coming in, first of all, Vara on the way in pops the Aegis from Ikaria. Second of all, it's an implied 7 unless that Ixtun Merchant goes down. And if the Merchant goes down, it's still 5, which is an extra turn of Ikaria, but it's also making progress on the board. I don't hate the Haunting Scream Vara just for value. You got to deal with that Ikaria eventually anyway, and this can be half of that equation. If the Overmaster holds the Haunting Scream, wow, is Sabotage going to get its money?
Yes, I think that Overmaster's casting Haunting Scream. Basically, it comes down to Keratin Merchant versus Vara. Which one do you think is going to be more effective? And looking at the market, well, you could Haunting Scream back Merchant, exchange Found Banner for Dark Return, and play Vara, and then start attacking with Vara next turn.
Oh, that's exciting.
So this is really close. And once again, Overmaster, almost going to the clock here, but that's because this turn is really difficult. And
I think I think Overmaster likes your play. Man. And so Dark Return being able to hit Vara potentially after combat means that you're still making that progress on Ikaria's Aegis situation, but Vara gives the Overmaster a legit board presence, because even though Ikaria is such a powerful threat, Vara actually wins the race. Like, if Vara is just gaining 6 or even 8,
And at this point, the Ixtun Merchant from Cranky Panda can't get anything that can deal with Vara. You can get a Statuary Maiden that can trade with Vara, but that's still going to give Overmaster not only a hit with Vara, but the opportunity to draw an answer to Statuary Maiden before attacking.
Yeah, and how many turns it's going to be until Ikaria's +5/+5 or +10/+10 unit or weapon is definitely another big outstanding question.
So yeah, we're going to see a Statuary Maiden here, still saving that Sabotage. Ikaria hits. This is going to put Overmaster 5 every draw step from Overmaster has to hit here. Oh, another Haunting
Wow.
Scream. So that doesn't hit the Merchant anymore because Overmaster has no cards to exchange, but Overmaster can get back another Vara, buying that much more time.
And the Overmaster does have 2 Varas. Man, this is an intense situation because they really need to be pressing this turn. Being at 5 and not able to block, however this shakes out, they're going to have to attack with at least 1 Vara. But if they attack with 2, that's first of all, that's potentially, what is that? That's like 12 to 14 points of health that they gain. That's a huge buffer. But also, you can't just keep taking hits from all these Varas.
Yeah, so Haunting Scream is gonna get played. Overmaster is gonna go ahead and let's see what they get. Vara seems like it might be the most effective right now.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Bandit Queen. Okay, so Bandit Queen can attack past the Ikaria, but actually critically it gives quick draw. So that means that the Statuary Maiden cannot trade for the Vara. So this gives you another hit of Vara. That's a very interesting play. But here's a gigantic Statuary Maiden. So now Cranky Panda has to worry about dying to madness on their own Statuary Maiden. They have a pretty big incentive to not hit with both, to not leave themselves in a position where that does kill them.
And this is interesting. This Ikaria means the Overmaster is once again 1 turn away from lethal, but with that Statuary Maiden coming down, I mean, and there's nothing to discard to the Keratin Merchant.
The Overmaster's credit has run out. They have nothing to spend. They spent it all. They spent it all earlier.
Well, this isn't it though, right? Can't the Keratin Merchant chump the Stone Scar, chump the Statuary Maiden?
So at this point, this is going to put Overmaster up to 11. You could chump Statuary Maiden, though. This will give Cranky Panda another cudgel. So the Overmaster does get 1 more hit in here. The second cudgel is critical, though. It can go on the Ikaria, and then so many things are lethal here. Harshul is not one of them, though.
Yeah, I mean, does the cudgel on the Ikaria even change the math enough to matter? Like, is putting the Overmaster at 2 instead of 4 a big enough deal? Or do you just want to hold on to that cudgel for the ability to improve your board presence on a different turn?
Looks like Cranky Panda's going to wait. And once again, Overmaster gets to go back to the well.
Oh, wow.
All right. Whew. After a pretty stunning sequence of top decks, Overmaster hanging on for dear life turn after turn after turn. They're not quite going to get there. Cranky Panda is going to advance to the finals here. All they have to do is swing with Ikaria. Whether the Keratin Merchant attacks or not is of no consequence, and that will do it. Cranky Panda has defeated the Overmaster, and, well, we know what our finals matchup is going to be now. We've got the Cranky Panda on Fire Justice Shadow mid-range going to be facing down against the winner of the Haunting Scream decks in the other bracket. Given that Cranky Panda just defeated a Haunting Scream deck, they might be feeling decent about the matchup.
Oh yeah, I mean, and we saw lots of little choices that are not necessarily industry standard really benefiting Cranky Panda. Devastating Setback, not everybody's using that. Looks great in this matchup.
That game.
Absolutely. The full-on adoption of Ikaria despite the change, a lot of good choices made, and it really paying off in this event.
Yeah. So, congratulations. Of course, to the Overmaster for making the top 4. Great accomplishment. Again, over 3,000 players participated in the event. We do have our finals. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the bracket here. And let's see, we've got Dunkelwerk has continued to win. We started on them. We saw them defeat Grimfan in round 1. They have not lost since. They defeated Notorious GHB last round. And so now we've got a final setup here of Dunkelwerk against Cranky Panda. It'll be interesting to see who ends up taking the crown here.
Yep, I mean, and this really is today's competition distilled down. Haunting Scream, the deck of the event, or so it would seem. Cranky Panda, the challenger, emerging, facing all threats.
Yeah, cooking the books, just getting some brew going. And we'll be back in 5 minutes. We're going to take a short break before our final start, and we will see you then.
End of the road, friend.
Alrighty, welcome back to the finals of our Eternal Test Tournament here, Reunion. I'm Luis Scott Vargas here with Patrick Chapin. We'll be bringing you, of course, commentary on the entire finals. The winner of this gets 100 packs. That's our prize, and we're just gearing up here. You know, we've got our World Championship qualifiers coming up, and we're going to be having a slightly different scale of prize once we get to that point. But still, 100 packs. That's a lot of pack openings, and I think were I to open all those packs, I'd probably get like at least 2 to 3 legendaries.
Yeah. You've never run above expectation. In your life.
No, of course not. So let's break down the matchup we have. We've got Cranky Panda. We saw Cranky Panda play the last couple rounds here on kind of a Fire Justice Shadow mid range, and really evenly split among those 3 factions. I wouldn't say any of particularly minimized.
Yeah, kind of for this field, about as controlling as we've seen without it just getting run over. This is sort of almost a control deck for the dealing with the realities of how fast
Right.
Haunting Scream is.
And of course, mentioning Haunting Scream, that's who we've got on the other side of the bracket. And we've got Dunkelworks, who's playing this tri-faction Haunting Scream deck that a lot of players have chosen to bring to this event. We had 3 in the top 8, 3 in the top 4 actually. So we're gonna get the whole numbers of the tournament, like we're the top 32, and we're gonna see exactly kind of what ended up there. But at least from our point of view, from the broadcast point of view, Haunting Scream has done exceptionally well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And seeing a finals between these, there's still a lot of different ways that this can play out. I mean, the combination of Statuary Maiden as an endgame, Rizan as an endgame, Akari as an endgame, and sort of the Sky King, there are a lot of different and powerful threats that can each give Cranky Panda a way to continue to build their advantage without needing to be so reliant on cooking the books like he was against all of his other matchups. But if Haunting Scream comes out guns blazing, it's just so tough. But who knows? Devastating Setback, definitely a wild card that we don't see too much of.
Yeah, and one of the keys for Cranky Panda has been a lot of their plays stabilize them and kind of catch them back up. So you've got Vara with Lifesteal, Rizan with Lifesteal most of the time, almost all the time that we've seen, and immediately dealing 3 and gaining 3. When it gets played. And then, sweepers, removal. So all this stuff, we'll see if Cranky Panda can hold on or Haunting Scream will scream past the finish line. We've got the finals coming right up.
End of the road, friend.
Welcome to the finals here at our Eternal Test event. We've got Cranky Panda on top, facing down against Dunkelwork on the bottom. I'm Luis Scott Vargas here with Patrick Chapin, and we're going to see who emerges victorious here. Looks like, Dunkelwork has what is typical of these stream decks, depleted power the first couple turns. That's kind of how they built their deck.
Oh, yeah, and Cranky Panda definitely capitalizing on that high seeding. I mean, these Haunting Scream matchups are so tempo-oriented. Cranky Panda doing so well in the Swiss is really coming out to be a benefit here, giving them 1 extra turn to try to set up a defense.
So that Champion of Fury comes down on 3 for Dunkelwork, and now Cranky Panda has to decide, do they want to just play a Vara unprotected, or try to, play conservative and play those removal spells? Looks like Cranky Panda is just going to run out Vara, and it's going to work out reasonably well. It's going to trade for Dunkelwork's Carrington Merchant if Dunkelwork chooses to go down that route.
Well, and if they do go that route, that is 1 more card out of Dunkelwork's hand as well. You gotta actually trade something.
Right, it is a 2-for-1.
Right, and on the flip side, though, if Dunkelwork advances to their board, they're just walking more into the Devastating Setback. And sure enough, we do see the Combust come down. Cranky Panda getting a little bit of tempo, but I love, not Cranky Panda, but Dunkelwork getting tempo, but I love Cranky Panda's position here.
Dunkelwork has, wisely chosen to stay on 4 power here and have the rest be action, so they're going to be able to lay out some stuff. Oh, wow, yes, that was the play we've been talking about. Quarry finding a harsh rule, discarding Privilege of Rank, which then, of course, plays it immediately, so that was one of the better Quarries you can expect.
Oh, yeah, and Quarry actually plays a deceptively important role in these Rizan decks that actually have access to Shadow. It's not only a spell in your Void, it's sometimes 2 spells in your Void, meeting the criteria for Rizan to make sure that you're getting that lifesteal. And Crunch down here is an interesting choice, meaning that the Bandit Queens have a little bit more implied value, but also that Dunkelwork is less vulnerable to any potential devastating setbacks.
Cranky Panda gonna wipe the crunch with the harsh roll. You just don't want to get hit with crunch if you can avoid it, and you might as well run out the cookbook too. Ikaria coming down for a top end, gonna see play in 2 turns here, but you know, if Cranky Panda, will they have enough health to really make use of that Ikaria?
Man, this is an interesting spot, because even though it doesn't look like Dunkelwerk has all that much going on, 2 Bandit Queens and a Haunting Scream, that's a lot of implied damage.
Well, Dunkelwerk did take Devastating Setback out of Cranky Panda's hand and just saw a harsh roll. I wouldn't be surprised if Dunkelwerk hits for 4 with the Bandit Queen and then plays Grenadin Drone, not knowing that Cranky Panda's drawn another Devastating Setback, which is going to live up to its name here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And without having any Dusk Raider shenanigans or anything like that, these Haunting Screams are a little bit capped on how much damage they represent. They're all quite good, but they're not nearly as devastating as Haunting Scream decks are sometimes capable of assembling.
So Devastating Setback will wipe the board here for Cranky Panda. They get to even play a Crest of Vengeance. They use their Cauldron Cookbook, so there is the Firebomb count is 1 floating there. And now Dunkelwerk, yeah, they're just going to run out Bandit Queen, hit for another 4 here. It's gonna be tough though. Ikaria having Aegis is a pretty big game, and Ikaria now gets to come out. Even for 8, Ikaria is still quite effective.
This is where you need to really have Madness on your opponent's Vara, so that you can, you know, Madness the Vara and then Scream it back so that you can pop an Aegis in a spot like this.
So multiple Haunting Screams.
Interesting.
And remember, Dunkelwerk has access to a lot in their Void right now. They have another Bandit Queen.
Carradin Merchant?
They can get Carradin Merchant. They might actually have Lethal here. It looks like they do, because they can just scream back Bandit Queen plus Crunch, and that's just 3, 4 strength attackers.
Wow. And the Champion of Fury, even better, but man, what an out of nowhere.
Yeah, that second Haunting Scream that just delivered, and then a Cranky Panda finds himself down a game after just a couple of minutes here.
And it didn't even seem like Dunkelwerk was coming out that fast, but
no, they just played a lot of Bandit Queens, hit for 4. You know, not the most exciting of plays, but that incremental damage adds up, and you know, at this point, Cranky Panda has nothing they can do. You know, at this point.
And we're on to game 2.
So Dunkelwerk is up a game, and they took a game on the play, on the draw, which is
breaking serve.
Yeah, very important, because even if Dunkelwerk loses this game, they know in game 3 that they're going to be going first, and that'll give the Haunting Scream decks a lot more leverage when it comes to pressuring the opponent.
Yeah, this Haunting Scream deck is such an interesting phenomena in Eternal. It has some aggressive elements. It has some fancy plays it can make, and it often will play out like a combo deck, but despite being such a bursty combo deck, it has access to so many high-quality cards that are just, you know, I mean, Champion of Fury, Bandit Queen, Vicious Highwayman. We're talking about just absolutely very strong cards for being able to power through somebody who's actually picking apart your combos.
And, you know, we've seen Carradin Merchant be a big part of that, too. It's flexible, can get the Madness or the Combust, whichever part you're missing. Works very nicely with Haunting Scream. We've seen people chain Merchants where they draw Haunting Scream, get back Merchant, trade a card for a Dark Return, get back something else. And it just gives this aggressive deck that has opening hands of, you know, Champion of Fury, the ability to punch through in the late game as well. All right, looks like game 2 is ready, so we're going to head back on down.
End of the road, friend.
Welcome to the finals here at our Eternal Test event reunion. We've got Cranky Panda down a game here, facing down against Dunkelwerk, who, you know, up a game and feeling probably pretty good about this hand with double Champion of Fury. If those champions can get 1 hit in before dying, they've done their job. And we saw that last game. Champion got a hit in, Bandit Queen got a hit in, Bandit Queen got a hit in. That just set up for lethal off the double Haunting Scream. No even fancy tricks. It was just Haunting Screaming back things that have, you know, 4 strength.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Champion of Fury and Bandit Queen have got to be on the short list. If you were going to ask the players of this top 32, what are the game's best all-time aggressive units, those 2 would for sure be on the short list. And the one drawback, though, with Dunkelwerk's hand is a little bit slow of an opening, right? Like, it's got everything that it could really want in terms of the aggressive units, but they're not going to really start until turn 3.
And we've seen this time and time again. These Scream decks just play their 2-drop on turn 3, because unless they draw almost exactly Grenadin Drone or the right mix of basic sigils, they're just not able to play undepleted power the first couple turns, because they lean heavily on crests and banners, which does make their 3-faction deck work and increases their consistency by scouting. but it just means their champions are really, 3-cost cards instead of 2-cost cards.
Yeah, but I've heard a couple players in this event actually describe Champion of Fury as the game's best 3-drop. So one player in particular, but here we're going to see that potentially as part of the equation anyway. I mean, Champion of Fury is one of the best 2-drops to play on turn 3 with just how much stronger it gets when you have double fire and double primal.
So another note here, we have the head-to-head stats for these players as well. Cranky Panda is leading Dunkelwerk 7-5. So they played 12 times, and Cranky Panda slightly ahead though. It looks like Dunkelwerk is making some strides in evening that up.
Oh yeah, so here we see Cranky Panda with lots of great options, but that torch is really, really important, as it potentially speaks to Cranky Panda being able to make 2 plays in a turn finally, because if he's only making 1 a turn for the first several turns, he's just going to keep falling 4 points, 4 points, 4 points behind.
So this is an interesting turn, or Dunkelwerk has 2 different options. They can play Crunch or they can play the Champion of Fury. Do they want to just guarantee the 4 points from Champion of Fury while Cranky Panda doesn't have any power up, or do they want to spend more of their power, play their card that can't attack quite yet anyway, and get Crunch on the board? So this is a pretty big decision point, and we'll see what Dunkelwerk decides momentarily here.
And he does decide to go with the Crunch, which is potentially more power efficient. It opens up some of the avenues of Champion of Fury plus, like, for instance, if a Keratin Merchant comes down next turn or something like that. And if nothing else, I mean, Crunch hits pretty hard.
I like this line from Cranky Panda because they found the Statuary Maiden off core. It only costs 3, and that lets them go Statuary Maiden, torture Crunch, turn it into a cudgel so you can't Hunting Scream it back.
But at the very least, Dunkelwerk has set themselves up so that Vicious Highwayman can make that Felm Banner undepleted, and the Vicious Highwayman's 1 damage on the Statuary Maiden can combine with the Torch to finish the job and then get in there to drain for 4. A lot of back and forth.
Yeah, definitely. And we see Cranky Panda kind of hands stuck with a bunch of harsh rules. Like, they're going to have to cast their Privilege of Rank, and every turn they don't, they've been missing power drops, but they keep having these appealing 4-power plays, like, for example, playing Vara this turn.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the last thing you want to do is take a turn off to just cast Privilege of Rank. If you just play Privilege of Rank here, you're potentially taking like 10 or more damage next turn, depending on what comes down. I mean, this is a real dicey spot. But if you just play Vara, are you opening yourself up to just getting slammed by Madness or some kind of a removal spell?
Well, the good thing about playing Vara is that Madness without exactly Devour doesn't do that much. It's not quite lethal, and we ran into this earlier in the tournament where you can't use Madness plus Combust if the opponent has no units.
And Dunkelwerk, sputtering just a little bit, can't make use of this extra power. I mean, Dunkelwerk being 1 long and Cranky Panda being 1 short means both players are trying to make do with what they have, but...
Yeah, Dunkelwerk in the unenviable position of having to sacrifice Champion of Fury to Combust, which puts them ahead on health, 33-13, but Cranky Panda has 6 cards in hand, and I think is going to start, paying dividends on that.
Now, is there any chance that he puts the harsh rule in? Oh, yeah, he does. That, the cudgel coming down on the 3/3, making it a 5/5, that's actually, oh, and the Permafrost, though, changes the equation again.
Yeah, Permafrost, a pretty good draw for Dunkelwerk. They still would like 1 more threat, but they're getting close. At this point, Cranky Panda can only play 1 card per turn, and, they're in the danger zone. 9 health is not a lot against this Hunting Scream deck.
So, Statuary Maiden is obviously... the straightforward possible answer and would happen to be effective against Dunkelwerk's Torch. However, Ixtun Merchant getting Rizon could potentially be a very exciting next turn.
So it looks like Cranky Panda is going to go with Harsh Roll, which just to play things safe, not lose to another Permafrost or another way to stop a blocker. And Dunkelwerk drawing a Devour, they can't be very happy about that.
No, and here Cranky Panda's patience finally paying off with Privilege of Rank. Being able to be played in the same turn as Ixtun Merchant.
Yeah, and I think maybe to go get that Rizon you were talking about, exchanging away the Cookbook or a Justice Sigil, maybe even the Cookbook, I don't know. I think at this point you're not really relying on that. And this puts Dunkelwerk in a pretty tough spot, though Dark Return has to be a good draw for them.
Yep, and the Rizon here is still going to be just so effective. Dunkelwerk doesn't even have the power to be able to devour in response. Man, a lot of players were very, very skeptical of Rizan early on, but history has certainly been very generous to the Rizan. That said, 3 health, even going up to 6, this isn't the most.
No, Madness would be is the card Dunkelwerk really wants here. Ooh, Shakedown not going to do it. It's going to whiff, and it also means that Rizan gets a hit in here. So I think that we might be seeing a game 3 if Dunkelwerk can't turn things around quickly. 38 health. That's a lot. That doesn't really matter, though. It really matters what Cranky Panda's up to. And devastating setback, stripping a Devour, Rizan getting a hit in, getting to play Statuary Maiden. This just puts Cranky Panda so far ahead that their lead will be unassailable if Rizan gets maybe 2 more hits in.
Yeah, and here we're seeing some of the strength of that Statuary Maiden transforming the Crunch into a Cudgel. It meant that Dunkelwerk didn't have the option to go get Crunch, put it down as a 4/4 that could live through the Rizan that he anticipated Cranky Panda having, and still hold up power for Devour.
Yeah, that would have been a much more swingy play, but again, thanks to the power of Statuary Maiden, it was not possible. Rizan getting a hit in here, it's going to equalize the health totals a little bit more. And at this point, Torch maybe not the most appealing.
No, it's kind of funny to think of wanting to put Torch on the bottom against a Scream deck, but, I mean, is it even doing anything for you here? Maybe. I mean, I guess in potential, it potentially could take down a charging Vicious Highwayman or Bandit Queen, but Cranky Panda might be greedy. Cranky Panda might want to just go even bigger. The Rizan getting in again, though, means that at this point, Dunkelwerk is going to have to actually chain something together.
Well, that does kind of count. Granite Waystone gets Cranky Panda a Grenadin. That Grenadin can be combusted away, but what do you combust? If you kill the Statuary Maiden, either way you're giving Cranky Panda a Cudgel. Yeah, so Dunkelwerk takes out the Rizan, gives Cranky Panda a Stone Cudgel, but at this point it's kind of a stalemate, and neither player can really attack here.
Right, and it's not like you want to be in the situation where you have a Dusk Raider and they have a Statuary Maiden and several cards in their hand. But at least the Cranky Panda's health total isn't just running away with things.
Oh, wow. Bandit Queen was a very big draw here. Even if Bandit Queen gets torched, it still means that Dusk Raider gets to get in for 7 here thanks to Quick Draw.
Yep, that charge. I mean, the Quick Draw making it so that the Statuary Maiden's Deadly is not effective. It does mean, though, that it looks like Cranky Panda is willing to chump with the plan of just Harsh Ruling and putting ourselves in a top deck battle.
Well, you know what's good in a top deck battle? Sword of the Sky King is going to go a long way for Cranky Panda, and the Harsh Rule clearing the way for Sword. Cranky Panda looked like they were far ahead, and even though it came down to top decks, I think at this point we can say that they have a commanding lead once again.
Yeah, I mean, this Grenadin is a small offense compared to what Sword of the Sky King opens up. If Dunkelwerk can't assemble some sort of charge, serious threat quickly, it's going to be all she wrote, and Cranky Panda's Torch is making that even more unrealistic.
And I like the conservative play here from Cranky Panda, not torching the Grenadin to get in for 8, because really it's not Dunkelwerk's life total you want to attack. You want to protect Sword of the Sky King, and Torch does just that.
But we do see one of the best possible draws on top of Dunkelwerk's deck. He chooses to keep the Keratin Merchant, and with Cranky Panda dropping a Rizan, what's the play? Because, man, even Madness doesn't do enough to actually kill the sword.
So we're going to get a Haunting Scream here. Let's see what we get back here.
Now, the interesting thing about getting the Dusk Raider is that even though it's 1 short of killing the Sword of the Sky King, it is the Nightfall means that it can actually finish the job. And as it turns out, Cranky Panda's Torch is going to have to take it down with help from... oh, yeah, it doesn't even need to because of the Haunting Scream dying. But the Torch being able to clear the way for Keratin Merchant means that Dunkelwerk has only 1 draw step left before... oh, man.
Oh, wow. This is going to work out so well. The Nightfall means that Dunkelwerk got to see Shakedown, which gets the Torch out of Cranky Panda's hand, clears the way for Bandit Queen. Bandit Queen's going to take out Sword of the Sky King, and, well, we're back to top deck mode There's Ikaria.
Yeah.
Cranky Panda is firing on all cylinders here. Every time Cranky Panda's down to no cards in hand, no relevant cards at least, they've drawn an 8-drop, and yeah, Ikaria is going to get the job done here.
And that's one of the risks of a card like Shakedown. It's incredibly powerful, efficient discard, but it does have that Nightfall component too, which really increases the volatility of the following turn.
And the Nightfall drops Dunkerwork to 5. Ikaria will finish the job, and we've got a game 3 here.
Man.
So these players, you know, really going back and forth. It kept looking like Dunkerwork was out, and the fact that they weren't is a good sign for them for game 3, because you can get to the point where your opponent has an overwhelming board position and a lot of health, but the Haunting Scream deck is so good at trading that they can end up still winning from that position. And if not for that Ikaria top deck, maybe Dunkerwork would have taken that game.
Now, but on balance, Cranky Panda gets to go second, and what we've seen so far in this match, the results sure point to going second being synonymous with victory.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I would count on that. I would still choose to go first, but Cranky Panda is going to have really prioritize draws with Torch. I think Torch is the most important card for them to have in their opening hand.
Yep, and it would appear the rumors of Ikaria's demise have been greatly exaggerated.
Yeah, slightly overstated here. As you know, we've seen Ikaria be the finishing blow for a number of games here, as Cranky Panda has Ikaria in the main deck, also in the market.
Mm-hmm. So I think that we can't really ask too much more out of these Haunting Scream decks besides, I think, man, if you can just drop a threat on the first or second turn, I really question the whole needing to wait until turn 3 thing. But
well, we'll see what happens in game 3 and whether Dunkerwork can get on the board early, like you said. So let's head down to the game.
End of the road, friend.
Welcome to Game 3 of the finals. We've got Dunkerwork on the bottom here, playing Haunting Scream, against Cranky Panda, playing a tri-faction control deck here, and Cranky Panda does have a Torch in their opening hand, and they have a Seek Power that can go ahead and pick it up. So, good start for Cranky Panda. What's Dunkerwork got going on? Well, not a whole lot, except that Champion of Fury was a good draw.
oh yeah, I mean, Dunkerwork is definitely on the hunt for some Shadow Influence to try to turn on the rest of their hand. But at the very least, having 2 strength worth of units across 2 bodies on the first turn is one of their best openings, and this Champion of Fury next turn is definitely going to put Cranky Panda in a bad spot, because likely Cranky Panda is, Cranky Panda's got to weigh what are the chances. Do they want to play the Crest of Vengeance now, which opens them up to the Champion of Fury, which we see, or do they risk it with the Torch and make the next 2 turns off curve?
And one of the things Cranky Panda was hoping to see there was some kind of undepleted Shadow Influence, because then Devastating Setback would just wipe the whole board. Instead, they're going to take 5 this turn, and next turn they still can't quite cast Devastating Setback.
Right, I mean, Seek Power is a step in the right direction, and at least Torch can help stem the bleeding. But Cranky Panda is going to be taking a little bit more damage before they can stabilize things. The real question, though, is will Dunkerwork draw Shadow Influence next turn? Because Shakedown taking Devastating Setback would be devastating.
So Cranky Panda's got another interesting play here. Do you play Seek Power plus Torch this turn, or do you just play Extend Merchant with the goal of likely getting something like Rizon?
That's so dicey, too. It's high risk, high reward. If you play the Extend Merchant here, there are a lot of things, whether it's Madness or even just a removal spell. I mean, you see the Dunkerwork miss their 3rd power drop. How much stock do you put in that? I mean, what are the cards in Dunkerwork's hand? I mean, you do want to be pressing your advantage while you can, because if you sit around, eventually Dunkerwork's going to find some Shadow Influence and open up the other half of the deck.
Well, it looks like Ixtun Merchant is what got played, and even though Dunkerwork is missing Shadow Influence, they have the pretty obvious play, because they can't cast anything else, of Torch, hit for 5. This still puts Cranky Panda in a good spot, though, because now they can Seek Power for a Shadow Influence, play that, Devastating Setback, and Dunkerwork really is under pressure to draw their own Shadow Influence to be able to get back on the board.
Yeah, and with very few threats in the waiting, I mean, Dunkerwork is a ways away from really doing anything. I mean, here we see another power card, but because of it not being Shadow, there's not really a lot here. How much is it going to come into play, the whole steal your Vara, hit you, and kill your Rizon with a Combust? Because now we actually have ourselves a game.
Yeah, this looks this looks a lot closer. Drawing the Stone Scar banner was critical. And remember, even though the banner's depleted, it unlocks the influence right away. So Dunklework is able to play that Carrington Merchant. Potentially getting rid of Shakedown or Haunting Scream. I'd likely want to keep their whole Madness Combust engine together, and they're actually trading a Combust for a Combust. So they just wanted the 2-1 Deadly in play, and they give Cranky Panda false information by showing an exchange in the market, even though they actually exchanged the exact same cards.
And this is interesting. The keeping of Shakedown, it's going to end up potentially bricking here.
Well, it'll hit a cudgel, but that's not exactly what you had in mind.
Right. Man, this is wild. Now, who do you take here? Do you take the Vara or do you take the Statuary Maiden? If you take the Statuary Maiden, that's a Scream target that gives you a little bit different of an avenue. But yeah, it seems to me that you probably just want the Vara for extra damage. But here we see he does take the Statuary Maiden.
And Cranky Panda was looking for an undepleted fire influence, but instead found a crest. Still going to be pretty good, though, because at this point, Cranky Panda's got 2 Rizons on deck, and Dunklework is just a step too slow to really punish Cranky Panda. Despite Cranky Panda having to spend multiple turns, like Seek Powering, to get the right mix of different sigils, I think Cranky Panda's going to be pretty happy with how this game plays out.
And Cranky Panda chooses to keep the Sabotage, which is a real show of strength. I mean, it's sort of a, I think I'm in such a good spot that I just don't want to get combo killed out.
Exactly, and you could even run Sabotage into Ixen Merchant if you wanted, or you can just slam a Rizon. You're at 15 going to 18. It seems that Cranky Panda's inclination is just to play Rizon, which I wholeheartedly agree with.
Yeah, and I think very likely we would see something different next turn, because once there's 2 Rizons down, you're opening yourself up to the Combust Madness type of stuff. But the first Rizon just seems like such a powerful effect to put on the board.
So Cranky Panda is going to get back Statuary Maiden. This play is a little bit greedy, because if Dunklework gets back Maiden and Cranky Panda just doesn't block either unit, that Torch can't finish off Rizon. So Dunklework could have gotten Carrington Merchant to go get Combust, but they went for the high risk, high reward play. Oh, the Carrington Merchant's a Cuzzle. So this is really their only line, and it's not going to work out well for Dunklework, but I don't know that they had much of a choice.
Yeah, I think here we're definitely seeing some of the difference of taking the Statuary Maiden instead of the Vara, where it's really adding up. That extra, having an extra not only 6 damage, but gaining 10 health will go a long way. So Rizon likely getting in, but now the question is, are we going to see, and it looks like we probably are, Privilege Rank setting up the extra power means the Cranky Panda can both Sabotage Dunklework to make sure the coast is clear, drop an Ixen Merchant, and potentially have both Rizon and Sword of the Sky King as follow-up.
And if they would even really wanted an Ikaria or something, like at this point, Cranky Panda's in full command of the game, and they're much in the same mode we talked about earlier, which is not how do I win, but how do I avoid losing, because I'm not going to lose this game unless something very extreme happens.
Yep, and here we see Rizon continuing to just do that extreme thing in the direction that Cranky Panda already has. So is Dunklework... I mean, what can Dunklework realistically do to try to get 2 things going? Because once this deck falls behind, if they don't have a void filled with powerful threats, what options do they really have?
It's going to be really difficult. I don't really see how Dunklework gets out of this. And I actually really like Cranky Panda's play last turn of playing Ixen Merchant and not exchanging anything. Just keeping the 8-drop, keeping the 8th Sigil, keeping the Rizon, just making sure you have something powerful to play next turn no matter what happens.
Yep, absolutely. And man, very impressive showing from Cranky Panda all day today. The use of some of these interactive cards in conjunction with the merchants actually it's deceptively powerful for making it so that you can not only have access to your market for specific interaction and matchups, that can be very challenging, such as this or some of the control decks we've seen earlier, but you can actually put some of that stuff in your main deck. And here we see, like, for instance, Cranky Panda main decking Devastating Setback, main decking lots of cookbooks, with the knowledge that if it's the wrong matchup for it, you can put it back in your market. You can, smooth things out a little bit so that you effectively have access to a lot more customization for the matchup than just 5 cards.
Cranky Panda is going to swing in for 8 here. The bell has basically tolled at this point for Dunklework, and Cranky Panda just has to decide what they want to deploy, if anything. They don't even necessarily need to play something. because they're just that far ahead. They're just trying to think, what did Dunkirk draw last turn? Because they knew the turn before they didn't have anything because of Sabotage. Did they draw something last turn that matters? Is something going to make an impact? And might as well kill the Grenadin to reduce the number of combust outs. And that'll do it. Dunkirk draws another power, falls to this army of Rizons, and Cranky Panda is our reunion champion here. Cranky Panda wins 100 packs and the fame and adoration of the Eternal community. Well played, all competitors. We saw some really good matches today.
Oh, yeah.
Cranky Panda had the right recipe to get rid of all the Haunting Scream decks that they faced, but there was a lot of different decks in the top 32. It just so happened the brackets broke such that we saw the decks that we did. And, that was a lot of exciting games, a lot of back and forth.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the next couple of weeks take away from this, too, because obviously Scream, powerful presence this weekend, very impressive. Probably going to see a lot of reactions to that, both people trying it out, trying out these latest versions, and these are some players that have a reputation for having helped perfect the Scream archetype in the past. I mean, this is not their first Scream showing, but then also how much of a wild card is this is this new style, this Cranky Panda Fire Justice Shadow. It bears a lot of resemblance to some previous 3-faction control mid-range decks we've seen, but updated for the new world and very successfully.
Yeah, I mean, if you see fewer people using Channel of the Tempest to go over the top, you can grind them out with Cauldron Cookbook. And we saw that when Cranky Panda played against Argenport mid-range and just, used Cauldron Cookbook to build an unassailable advantage over the course of multiple games.
Very impressive.
So that'll do it for today. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thanks, all the competitors, for playing well and giving us entertaining games. For Patrick Chapin and our production staff, I'm Luis Scott Vargas, and we'll be back next time with more Eternal action. Thanks again.